Welcome to another exciting episode of Submission Radio. It's November 16th. I'm Dennis Shkradov. I'm here with Kasper Ozlowski, and what a weekend of fights in the world of MMA, Cass.
Yeah, absolutely. It was a really big weekend. World Series of Fighting 15, Bellator 131, UFC 180. Whole lot of knockouts, whole lot of ends to fights that we'll be talking about this week on Submission Radio. Lots and lots to talk about. And of course, we've got three big interviews. On the show, we've got none other than Tim Kennedy. He's going to be chatting to us about what is going on with his MMA career, when's he coming back, and all that good stuff. Renzo Gracie will be joining us on the program to talk Sakuraba, Metamoris, 5, and just his career in general. Of course, Aussie MMA icon Anthony Perosh will be on the show, fresh off his victory at UFC Fight Night 55, Bisping versus Rockhold. So he's going to be on the program as well. We've got a loaded show for you this week.
Yeah, that's right, guys. And also, don't forget, if you are a Twitter user, if you love your Twitter, follow us on Twitter at SubmissionAUS. We have a lot of great stuff, always the updates and everything that's happening, and Facebook, of course, as well. And also, if you are looking for MMA stuff here in Australia, if you're looking to buy some T-shirts, some cool gears or anything like that, everythingmma.com.au, they're the people to go to. They run a bunch of great shops around Australia, and they have a bunch of great deals, a bunch of great guys over there. I got a gi from there. It fit me perfectly, and they got a great deal as well, so make sure you check them out.
And of course, don't forget, not only is Submission Radio Australia's biggest weekly MMA show, but we've also got techniques on the YouTube channel, Submission Radio AU, I believe, every single Wednesday, brand new technique of the week, and this Wednesday is no exception. But other than that, guys, enough screwing around. It's time for our first guest, and I can't wait to speak to him.
Our next guest is one of the top middleweights in the UFC, a one-time knockout of the night and performance of the night bonus winner. Tim Kennedy is joining us on the line. Tim, welcome to Submission Radio.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Always a pleasure, Tim. Always a pleasure. Now, you've been doing some things recently, like hunting to take your mind off MMA for a while. First question is, how has that been going? Tell us about your big hunting trip.
Well, first couple of weeks after my fight was bow hunting season, so we went to Louisiana and did some whitetail, and people don't understand how much work hunting is. It's not like you go out and deer just comes out. You're throwing feeders, you're tilling soil, you're planting corn, switching out cameras, changing batteries, and then the second weekend I was up in the mountains of New Mexico, taking a buddy that got hurt real bad in the war on a bear hunt. And so we're riding horses and climbing up mountains and tracking down these big brown beasts. So it's been a lot of fun. Really, really enjoyed this hunting season so far, and just, keeping myself real busy.
Wow, that sounds like a pretty big operation. Usually when me and Casper think about hunting, we think of one guy with a gun sort of sitting in the bushes waiting for a deer to run by. Tell us, is there anyone from Jackson Winklejohns that enjoys doing hunting with you? Any of the other guys get into hunting with you?
Yeah. Cowboy, obviously. If it's outdoors, he wants to be involved in it. He's a monster when it comes to fowl hunting. Ducks and pheasant. He's pretty talented. The weekend that I was going bear hunting in New Mexico, he was going to come with me, but had to go to Las Vegas for I think a NASCAR trip or something. So I missed out on that. But a lot of guys. Greg Jackson loves to shoot. And, he's more of a sportsman. Shooting, he's not as much of a hunter, but there's a ton of dudes. Andrew Craig here in Austin goes with me a lot. So it's I think there's a surprising percentage of UFC guys that are really outdoorsmen at heart, and they just they fight just to support their hobby of being an outdoor guy.
Yeah, well, we saw Chad Mendes. Yeah, he had a picture of him with a bear, so I think he's pretty down with hunting as well. Tim, you're talking to two guys that have never. Well, actually, we've shot guns, but we've never gone hunting. I'm just curious. We saw on your Twitter you mentioned how you found a bear and it had an arrow through it or something to that degree, and you weren't too happy about it. I'm assuming there's some kind of rule with hunting. Are you able to just explain that to us?
Well, I'm not saying that poor bear that got hit with the arrow was being poached, but that a good hunter is conservationist first. the only time that I'm not ever hurting animals, is for food, and I use every single inch of that animal, every ounce of its meat, every bit of its fat, and every inch of its hide. I use everything. And the animals that I do get, it's an environmentally particular way, like a bear that we were shooting in New Mexico. What they do is they count the number of bears that they have in each region. They know how much food there is for each bear, and they say, okay, we need to get rid of this number of bears, otherwise they're going to starve or they're going to kill each other. So the best thing for the support in the life cycle of a bear is to keep that healthy balance of the ecology system. So so then you pay a bunch of money to get a permit, and you know exactly where you're supposed to go to get that exact bear. So I was the one with the permit, so if I come across a bear, that bear is not supposed to be there. That means somebody shot that bear improperly. And even worse, every time I've ever tried to shoot an animal, whether it's an arrow or a gun, that animal goes to the ground and it's dead by the time it hits the ground. That's something that my dad was very strict with us when we were being taught how to hunt. It's about ethics, it's about integrity, and you should never, ever, ever take a shot that you're not 100% confident what the result is going to be. So if I'm going to pull the trigger or I'm going to loose an arrow, I know that animal is going to go to the ground because that arrow is going to go straight to the lung, it's going to go straight into the heart, and the animal is going to collapse 2 steps later. If I'm shooting a gun, that bullet's going to go through a lung, it's going to go in the heart, and it's going to go out the other side and the other lung. I know that every time I pull the trigger. That obviously wasn't the case. I found this arrow in the back hind quarter of a bear. So one, ethically, it's a bad shot. It's an irresponsible shot. It's a selfish shot. It's one that, if I was there with that hunter, I'd punch him in the face. But then even worse was that guy shouldn't have been shooting that bear in the first place. So I was pretty fired up about it. I really love animals. I care about them. And, so when I come across one that, that bear died horribly, it died painfully, I'd love to, straighten that out with that hunter or puncher.
Yeah, now that you've explained the way it works, I absolutely understand, totally.
Yeah, absolutely some fascinating stuff, too. Now, something else that's happened recently is there was a big middleweight bout in Sydney. Me and Casper were there a few days ago, last weekend. What were your thoughts? Did you get a chance to watch the Rockhold Michael Bisping fight? And what were your thoughts on the performances from both men?
I didn't even need to watch it. Everybody had asked how that fight was going to go, and I said that Bisping was going to last 5 minutes with Luke. I have a lot of respect for Bisping, and actually a lot more since we've fought. He's come to my defense regarding PEDs, and like when I spoke out about other guys, he kind of backed me up. And then after my last fight against Yoel Romero, he was very outspoken about it. So I was like, wow, I was very surprised. With that said, Luke is a monster. I had no doubts that Luke was going to finish him within 5 minutes, and that ended up to be exactly what happened. I couldn't see a way that Mike could have won that fight. I think Luke could have beat him on his feet, could have beat him on the ground, could have out-wrestled him, could have outboxed him, could have out-kickboxed him. There was no way for Mike to win that fight. So there was no surprise there. I looked it up afterwards and I was like, oh, yeah, so there it was.
Well, you hit the nail on the head. He basically beat him, first on the feet and then on the ground. But you mentioned obviously Yoel Romero. It's been just over a month and a half, or about a month and a half since UFC 178, and obviously the hunting trip was to take your mind off MMA and things like that. Where are you at mentally, and do you feel like you're ready to sort of come back to MMA and start thinking about it and training and looking for a fight?
No, I'm still pissed off, at the sport, at the ref, but most importantly at myself. I made a huge mental error in that fight. I thought the fight was over a few different times. I thought I'd knock him out. I thought John pulled me off him. And then after I knocked him out, I'm sitting there on the stool trying to figure out what's going on. My corner's celebrating. The fans are celebrating. I'm like, yeah, it's done, cool. I'm watching him telling John and his corner, no mas, toma narse, like I'm down, no more. And, and then me standing up when the bell sounds and walking over there and John telling me, no, it's done, go back to your corner. So again, I start celebrating. I'm like, whoa, yeah. And I turn around and we're supposed to be fighting. I had left the ring before that third round I left the ring when the third round didn't start.
Mm.
When I was supposed to win, which is a big error on my part. I should have stayed in there, obviously, until I guess, I don't know when. Still pretty confusing and infuriating. So I'm really disappointed in the sport. I'm really disappointed in John. I'm really disappointed, in myself. So I'm gonna keep hunting. I got 5 more weeks of hunting season. I'm still training a ton. I'm still doing 2 or 3 workouts a day when I'm not up in the mountains. But this is, I'm not there yet.
And Tim, just an update as well. What's the outcome with appealing the decision? Is that still something that you're interested in? And if so, are there any updates on that process?
No, I haven't done anything official with the athletic commission. Again, another level in which I'm just disappointed that me as an athlete, I have to appeal a rule violation when they openly acknowledge that there was one. Post-fight in their release, they said, if there were a few different rules that were broken that night, and if he wants to appeal those that ruling, then he's more than welcome to do that. Like, how asinine is that? Then an athletic commission's like, yeah, rules were broken, but we're not going to do anything. Just again, stoking the fire of me being pissed off at the sport. It's wrong that I would have to do anything, so I'm not going to. That's I'm a pretty straightforward black and white guy, and when rules are broken, it's just how it's supposed to be, and I'm not going to do something to. I don't know. Even worse is like the MMA community. If I go and appeal it, it's like I look like the bitch. I'm the one that's like complaining about the outcome of the fight. That's not how I am. That's not, I'm not complaining. I'm just a straightforward person. I like things being the way that they're supposed to be, which is just and right. Which wasn't the case on that night. So I don't know.
Yeah, no,
it seems like a lose-lose.
Yeah, I completely understand where you're coming from. We noticed that I remember Renzo Gracie was on Ariel Helwani's show just not too long ago, and he was talking about he was saying how much of a huge fan he is of yours, loves to watch you compete. His advice was basically to let it go. I can understand sort of how tough that would be, judging from the events that took place. Did you see what Renzo said, and did you think about that in any way?
Yeah, I have great respect for that man. He's in a very short list of guys that have been very inspirational in my entire career. And I didn't see his specific words. Somebody had told me about, kind of summarized what he had said. And so I was encouraged by what he said, but I do agree with him. I think his perspective is correct.
And, before we get off the subject, obviously, I think this situation is a good precedent for the future to show really what kind of rules in MMA exist and how some of them are a bit faulty. Do you think some of these rules need to be amended for the future? Obviously, this is something that can reoccur in the future, and possibly the situation could open people's eyes to, some of the rules in MMA that don't really make a lot of sense.
Well, a lot of the rules exist. They're just not enforced. I can just go down this litany of examples of Andrei Arlovsky versus Rumble Johnson when the timekeeper didn't, ring the bell at the end of the round, and that's when Rumble Johnson breaks Arlovsky's jaw and gets a knockdown, and subsequently kind of ends up winning that fight. That's after the bell. It was at like 5 minutes and 20 seconds. But I'm sure we all know that rounds are 5 minutes.
Yeah.
And then a round is 5 minutes, a break is 1 minute. It's not 1 minute and 30 seconds like Yoel get. It's 1 minute. And if you don't follow the rules, there has to be repercussions. But seemingly there aren't any. The refs are cowards, and as are the judges, and then the fans are even worse because they won't back up a ref when he makes a decision. And and so I don't know, man. The rules are in place, just nobody's enforcing them. both in performance-enhancing drugs, timekeeping, shorts grabbing, eye poking. The rules are there, just nobody's following them and nobody's enforcing them.
Yeah, I mean, we even had our own incident here. It was when there was the debut of the flyweights, of course. Ian McCall faced Mighty Mouse, and that fight actually ended in a draw. But due to the scorecards not being tallied up correctly, I believe Mighty Mouse was declared the winner. So that's another sort of crazy incident. It just seems like every week or so, like you said, something's happening. Rules are being, I guess, broken. Nothing's being done. Do you think then maybe needs to be a bit of a shake-up in I don't know, MMA judging or reffing or something to that degree, or the State Athletic Commission?
Yeah, absolutely. I don't know, maybe with a cattle prod. Ultimately, I'm told that it falls on the responsibility of the athlete. So, I'm supposed to go to the athletic commission and officially appeal and protest something. That's asinine. It's the athletic commission's job to make sure that the officiating, the judging occurs correctly. It's not the athlete's. The athlete's job is supposed to go out there and fight, and he's supposed to execute, his athleticism within the guys, which is within the limitations of the sport, and those limitations are the rules. But I guess the rules don't exist, so I guess I'm going to bring a bat to my next fight. Or I'll just ask Yoel if I could borrow the stool that he's sitting on, and I'll beat him with the stool, and I guess that would be legal as well. But he wouldn't have gotten up, so I'd have to go get a different stool.
And I was going to say, Tim, obviously it's a rematch that people would want to see. Is that still something you'd be interested in, fighting Yoel again in the future?
No, I give two shits. I told John McCarthy before the fight, he's going to cheat when he starts losing. He started cheating when he was losing, and I don't think that'll be any different again. I knocked him out at the end of the second round. That should be represented in my record. So no, I don't want to fight a cheater again. After a guy I already knocked out. So no, on two different levels.
Now, Tim, you mentioned how you're disappointed in the sport of MMA. Judging by the Twitterverse, it seems that the fans are interested in seeing you compete at a Metamoris against possibly a guy like a Forrest Griffin. Another possible fun matchup will be you against Chael Sonnen. I mean, given your fantastic grappling, would that be something you'd be interested in possibly?
Yeah, I would love it. I'll grapple both those guys on the same day. I'll wear a Speedo when I grapple Chael Sonnen, and then I'll wear a mini skirt when I grapple Forrest Griffin. Totally down for it. I'd have a blast. I love grappling. I have great respect for both those guys. I think, we'd put on a great show. So, Metamoris, they can call me and they're going to get one response from me, which is yes. I know that my team has been contacted regarding that, and they asked me if I'd be down for it, and I just straight up said yes. You could give me a list of 20 opponents, and I'd say yes to all 20 opponents.
Yeah, I think that would be absolutely awesome, and a lot of people would love to see that. Now, I've got a question for you, Tim. You say, obviously, you're a big advocate of competing clean, drug-free, cleaning up the sport of mixed martial arts. You mentioned that you've got a lot of respect for Forrest Griffin and Chael Sonnen. I'm just curious, if you were to compete against Sonnen in a grappling comp, would there be any hesitation on your part given Sonnen's history of failed tests?
That's something that we talked to Metamoris about in whatever the state that we'd be competing in. There did have to be some checks and balances in place regarding performance-enhancing drugs, especially because grappling jiu-jitsu is a true martial art. And I as much as I enjoy both those guys as people, I care about the reputation of that sport even more. So I'd want to ensure that, we have clean athletes that are trying to do the right thing, which is be a martial artist.
Sure.
And Tim, before you fought at UFC 178, you mentioned somewhere that you would consider dropping down to welterweight to possibly fight Robbie Lawler if you won the title. I'm just wondering, obviously you're a bit frustrated with MMA, but have you thought any more about a possible drop to welterweight? Is it something that's possible?
Yeah, it's something that's very possible. I'm a big, strong dude, but obviously I'm super short for my division, 185. We're playing guys like Luke Rockhold, Michael Bisping, and Renzo Gracie. like Yoel and Hatan Natal, like they're both like 6 foot and 6'1", and they're like the shortest guys I've fought, I think, in that division. So, yeah, there are some major advantages to moving down to 170. It's something that we've talked about and kicked around a lot, and I can make it. Like I enjoy being 230, 240, but a cut to 170, I've been there before, and it wouldn't be impossible.
Yeah, absolutely. And you mentioned before if you think that Robbie would possibly win the fight against Hendricks, and Robbie's obviously a guy that you've already beaten in Strikeforce, and that'd make for an interesting fight for the title. I know last time people had a few fan questions in regards to if Robbie was to lose and Hendricks was to remain champion, would you still drop down to fight Hendricks as well?
I think stylistically, the both those fights are fun for me. The only problem is my brain, man. Both those guys hit so hard. Johny and I've never been hit by Johny. Just watching how he hits and the guys that he's put down, it's obvious he hits hard. And I have been hit by Robbie, and God, that guy hits like a freight train.
Yeah.
So I'd love to get in there and tussle with both of them. I think it'd be a lot of fun.
Great, Tim. Now, we let the fans know that you were coming on the show, so we've got a couple of fan questions to ask you. I'll kick it off with a question from NightFox66. His question is, you've been very clear about your feelings about Vitor Belfort. What are your thoughts on these extra tests the UFC are making Vitor take, and do you believe he'll pass?
Yeah, well, I hope he passes. We've seen pictures of him of late, like whether he's a little fatter than we've ever seen him ever, or he's a little skinnier than we've ever seen him ever. Well, guess what? Steroids work, and that's what happens to a body when you don't get to use what you've been using. And so, one of two things are going to happen. He's going to fail a steroid test moving towards this fight against Chris Weidman, or he's going to try to be clean, and he's going to get injured, or he's going to look like a gay giraffe. Either one of those instances, Chris Weidman will freight train him, and or he won't show because he failed a test.
Wow, interesting. Now, I've got another question from the fans. It's from the GOAT. Tim, could you confirm this? You started fighting in 1996 and you had 31 amateur fights, only having your first pro fight in 2001. Is this true? And if so, why did you wait such a long time to go pro?
Yes, it's true, but kind of true. There wasn't really like pro and amateur back then. That's a really long time ago. I'm really old. There were only a few states that had sanctioned MMA bouts within the athletic commission. So a whole bunch of those, I'm using my fingers in quotation fingers when I say amateur fights, weren't amateur. Like I got paid to do them. So, whether it was on the Indian reservation because it was illegal in the state, or I was down in Mexico, which doesn't even have an athletic commission, or I didn't at the time, or I was in the Bahamas, or wherever I was, a lot of those fights didn't have a way to appear on your official professional record. By a lot, I mean like half of them. So, yes, it's true.
Wow.
And the final question here is from Silverfan. He'd like to know, with Anderson Silva back in the UFC, would you be open to fighting him one day if the opportunity arises in the middleweight division? And he'd also like you to give your prediction for Silva versus Diaz.
Yes, man. And drop of a dime, I would come back to fight that guy. Even though I hate the sport, I love that guy, and he's been a guy that's like, in my perspective, I've been a purist of a martial artist in the sport. Never failing any tests, always showing up to fight, being a true artist. And what he does, he's like a violent ballerina in the cage. It's beautiful. Nick and Anderson. Dude, I don't even know. I can't make a prediction on that. Besides, I will be tuned in. I will be glued to the TV. I'm a fan of both those guys on so many different levels, and I'm so excited to see that fight.
Oh, absolutely. You and us both and the rest of the world. Now, Tim, we're going to finish up this interview with something quick that we do. We did it with you last time, the Submission Radio Tap-Out round. Fire off a whole bunch of fun questions, and you answer with the first thing that comes to your mind. Are you ready?
Yes, sir.
All right, Tim, give us your ultimate Frisbee team.
Ultimate Frisbee team.
Yep.
Alistair Overeem, Cowboy, me, Landon, Frankie Lester, and Jerry Rice.
Awesome.
Wow, that's scary. Now, what's the favorite gun that you own?
Say that again?
What's your favorite gun that you own?
Oh, my goodness. Just one?
Just
Well,
one,
you know
I'm
what?
sorry.
You know what? We don't want to leave anyone out, hurt any guns' feelings. Maybe give us like a top 3 if you like.
All right, all right.
Okay, all right. Well, my favorite precision rifle, I have a 338 bolt action Lapua, and I can shoot almost, it pushes out to almost 2 miles. So that gun, it warms my heart every time I touch it. When I left my Halo sniper team and this kind of special forces unit that I was on, they gave me a Colt 1911 that was engraved with my roster number and the team that I was on. So on a sentimental level, that gun is very, very special. And then lastly, I have a Glock that it's a short story that the guy that I took that Glock from, he tried to kill me, and so now I have his Glock. So that gun more as a trophy, not as the 1911 has sentimental value. This one doesn't. This one is just like, don't try to kill me. Your gun, and we'll go well for you.
Well, we learned something there. Don't try and kill Tim Kennedy, Jesus. This question comes from a fan, actually. Rudolph, if you are in your 30s now and you could come back to your 20-year-old self, what advice would you give for training and fighting?
Don't jump out of as many airplanes. It's bad on the knees and the hips and the back. Swim more and spend more time in classes, not sparring.
Okay.
Wow, well, this is something that people can take away from the interview if they're young and they're listening. Now, Tim, we hear you're a great cook. What's a signature dish that you're known for? And let me just preface that with saying we've heard you cook up some great salmon.
Man, like my guns, which I own, a few hundred of them. You're asking me to narrow it down to 3 of my favorite. Equally so, I love food. So you're in all the different ways that you can blow somebody's mind with the deliciousness that you prepare. Can you just give us one? That's a painful thing that you're asking. But
it's the tap out round, Tim. It's the tap out round.
I'm gonna give you some Texas barbecue. I'm gonna smoke.
Oh yeah.
For 8 hours, some brisket and ribs. I'm gonna serve it with some bourbon and beer, and you're gonna have a peppery barbecue sauce to go with it.
Yeah, we're big foodies, and actually in Melbourne, there's a lot of those smokehouse places opening up. So you've definitely won our hearts over with that one, Tim. Here's a question though: how well does Tim Kennedy go in the Deer Hunter arcade game?
I feel ironic. I play that game a lot. Every time, my wife likes some of the wing places here, so we'll go there to watch the fights.
Yeah.
Or we'll go watch some college football, and I'll try to stake out the Deer Hunter game, and maybe I will or maybe I won't challenge some of the people in the bar to a little face off.
Yeah.
A little 1-on-1. So I do really well in that game.
Do you ever hustle anyone? Are you ever like, oh, am I holding it properly? Like, which is the button? And then you're like, bam, bam, bam. Well, the deers are gone.
Yeah, absolutely. The hustler by the pool table, and I'm the hustler in the arcade room.
Yeah.
Tim, this is going to be another head scratcher for you, but let's give it a go. You have a very comedic side. In your opinion, give us the top 3 comedies of all time.
Top 3 comedies of all time. It's a mad world. I'm going old school there. If you haven't seen it, look it up. It's absolutely amazing. I'm just going to say Bill Murray, period.
Yeah.
From Groundhog's Day to his Christmas version of Scrooged to there's Bill Murray, period. To current day where, he's pretending like he's a zombie so he can live and have a social life. And lastly, I think I'm going to go with kind of the dark side of humor, which are the military humor. And you have to look for them. They're usually in like army movies, and
like Inglourious Bastards.
Yes, Inglourious Bastards, good example. Or in the most recently in Fury, where they're back in the tank after the young kid went and got to hook up with one of the French women, and they start kind of like jabbing at him and like, yeah, you're a woman banging, whiskey drinking superstar. You know, that little insight into kind of like the military humor is acute and precise, and it's right on. And I think I peed myself in that one line when I was in the movie theater.
Yeah, we saw on your Twitter that you watched it, so we're definitely going to check that out. Tim, if you could have one rematch, which one would you choose?
One rematch. Jacare.
Wow, that would be amazing. And so,
I'm not sure if you saw that fight. It's super close, razor thin. I thought I won it. I thought I won actually 4 rounds to 1. But judging gave it to him. And another reason why I hate the sport. But I love him. I like him as dude. I like the way that he fights. I like that he comes to bring it. I love his grappling heavy approach. I like that he hits hard. And like we're both top 10 in our division right now, and that'd be a fun fight.
And finally, Tim, to wrap this all up, when will we see Tim Kennedy coming to Australia?
Next week.
Yeah.
I love that place. Kyle Noak is, one of my very close friends, and every time that we're together, we're trying to figure out schedules where we can both be there at the same time. I just love everything about that place. I love the mentality. I love the independence of the people. I love the strength and grit of the men. I love I love the nature there. I love the animals there. I can't wait to get there. So I'm going to say not soon enough.
Well, Tim, I think you just won over even more Aussie fans, and we would welcome you into the country with open arms anytime. Guys, you can follow Tim on Twitter at Tim Kennedy MMA. Just scrolling through his Twitter, we found a whole bunch of funny stuff. And if you haven't seen what Tim Kennedy wore for Halloween, that's an absolute must. Tim, it's always a pleasure having you on the show. We always learn a lot, and it's great having you on again. Thank you so much.
Absolutely, man. I really appreciate it, and thanks for having me on.
Hey, this is Alistair Overeem, and you are listening to Submission Radio.
All right, guys, our next guest is an absolute legend in both sports, both mixed martial arts and Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. He's an icon in the whole fight industry, and he'll be versing Sakuraba in a fantastic rematch at Metamoris 5. Today, he's on Submission Radio. He is none other than Renzo Gracie. Renzo, welcome to Submission Radio. How you going?
My dear friend, I wish you introduced me in my fights, I tell you.
We can redo it if you like.
You made me sound beautiful.
That was the aim, man. To make you sound beautiful is exactly my aim.
My brother, nice being here with you guys.
The pleasure and honor is all ours. Renzo, let's talk about this. Your first fight against Sakuraba, it was an MMA affair. It ended via technical submission due to Kimura. After the fight, how badly did you want a rematch with Sakuraba, and did you think it would take 14 years to finally happen?
I really thought that, because back then Pride was running the fighting scene, and I knew they would never allow me to have a rematch with him, And I couldn't believe, life started taking me in different directions and moving things in a different way, and I never thought I would have the chance to be able to sweat with him again, and I couldn't believe when the phone call came. I was completely out of shape, not training at all, taking care of some different business. When I got that call, I hang up the phone and I run 8 kilometers right away. I say, my man, put me in, and I couldn't believe they even tried to negotiate money with me. I would do that for free.
Yeah.
All they had to do is invite me to fight. I'll be right there.
Now, Renzo, Sakuraba was known for, having a little bit of a feud with the Gracies back in the day. Just wondering, how real was the feud to you going into your fight against him in Pride, and what's your relationship like now with him?
I always admired Sakuraba a lot. I always thought he was an honest fighter, and I really thought he was the Japanese version of the Gracies. Like he was a guy who studied, who had the guts to jump in there and represent his art. Was the first Japanese to really understand jiu-jitsu and train jiu-jitsu to improve his game. Even though he may call catch wrestling, you could see his game was completely different. It was always guided towards submission and resisting, enduring, and then reversing the game. So I always was his fan, to be honest with you. And you have to understand what forces a good fighter. It's their opponents. It's tough opponents. And I was lucky to have so many great enemies that I could battle with, sweat with, beat them, and lose to them. So Sakuraba was one of those.
Absolutely. Now, Renzo, I want to go back in time a little bit. I want to talk to you about your childhood. In the Metamoris countdown video, which you can see on YouTube, you shared an interesting statement, and this is a quote. You said, "If you cut my legs and arms off and you lock me inside a black cell, I'll be fed only enough to survive. 20 years from now, you're going to open the door and you're going to see a smile on my face. A man who has the memories that I have, who lived the life that I lived, can never be sad." Now, I'm assuming an amazing childhood. Can you tell us about some of those memories that make you so happy?
Oh man, everything. The friends that I made, the lifestyle that I was able to get it from my grandfather. I could never. It's like I still think the day that he told me my goal was to be a lawyer.
Wow.
And he looked at me and he goes, "You are Gracie. You should be a jiu-jitsu fighter and a jiu-jitsu teacher. You're gonna find happiness there, And he was right. I go, "You're going to be just another lawyer if you go to be a lawyer." I say, no, I'm going to be a great lawyer. And he goes, "Even if you're a great lawyer, you're just another lawyer. But if you're a Gracie and you represent us, you're going to be a unique individual." And it's true. I realize now the importance of this amazing gift that my grandfather gave me. He gave me he gave me friends. He gave me confidence. Now I realize that we are not in the business of selling martial arts. We're in the business of selling confidence. We're in the business of changing people's lives. We're in the business of feeling better about ourselves. It's like when we make people better, we feel great. That's why I'm always smiling. I say, how I cannot smile? And to be honest, I had a life that people that will live 100 years could ever dream to have it. And I had the experience and the chance to see things and meet people and exchange knowledge and learn and teach from that. It's like I fulfill my life already. It's like if my life ended up today, I think it was a great life. And what are we but souls looking to improve our way of shining, and we do that by being good in life, by being great in attending people and making people better and making a difference. And I believe I did that, and I'm glad to be able to say that out of my 47 years old only, even though I plan to live until I'm 100, at least. So that's why my statement of if you lock me in a jail cell, in a dark jail cell, just give me enough to survive, I will still, when you open 20 years from now, I'll still be smiling. Because with the memories that I have, I'm never alone. I have always great company. I always can cheer myself up, and I always can even when I'm walking by myself, I have great company.
Renzo, you're a legend in the sport, but it wasn't always so. Your first bout was in 1992 at the Gracie Bellator in Brazil. We're just wondering, what went through your head as you had your first ever professional fight? What was that experience like?
You have to understand, I was fighting on the streets on closed doors for many years when I get to my first fight, And I remember the first time I stepped in there, the only thing that I think, I say, finally, because now the things are a little bit lost, the concepts, but that was the first time that I could actually represent in public my family's name and my family's art, So I was very proud to be, I say, finally got to the day that I dreamed so much, that I worked so hard to be able to do it. And that was the day. That was the first time that I fought in public. Even though I fought many times in closed doors, in the street, or we set up matches that we set up and went there and fought, that was the first time that I was actually officially representing my family's art and name. And that made me very proud. And I knew that was just the beginning,
And so you mentioned that now the concepts are lost a little bit. What exactly did you mean by that?
It's because since the jiu-jitsu spread and the family spread too much, we lost a little bit the elders have passed away, so we lost a little bit the leadership. So each one does what it pleases them, you know?
Yeah.
It's like you don't have a government body, a governing body driving the whole family interest in one direction, you know? And we dreamed that could be Horton back then, but he could never fulfill those shoes, you know? And that was the only thing that we felt sad about. And it became hard. I work hard to be able to do it, but I'm still too young. I'm still getting in there. I'm still fighting with them. But I believe soon I'll be able to put things together so the future generations of my family can have the amazing life, the amazing experience that I had, you know, growing up and living and exercising this amazing lifestyle that we have.
Absolutely. Now, Renzo, you know, when you were fighting in Charlotte, North Carolina for the WCC in 1995, did you ever think that mixed martial arts would be such a huge global sport like it is today?
To be honest, I even think it took too long. There's no better entertainment sport than mixed martial arts. You know, though it's like people go to watch a NASCAR race to see the crash. People go watch a hockey game to see the fight. You know, they go watching the rugby game to see the battle there. That they put it in there.
Yeah.
We are guaranteed to give you a fight. We are guaranteed to give you a crash. You know, when you step in there with us. It's the most entertaining sport in the world. There's no such a thing more appellative than a fight. It's like you see a fight anywhere you are, you stop to watch it. You know, and you see professional guys, well-trained guys, prepared to fight each other, getting in the ring. It's the most beautiful fighting art form ever. You know, it's very captive. It's like the only way you could go. I went to the Olympics. I went to the Olympics in Australia. I had a great time. I love it. You know, it's like every time I step in Australian soil, I feel like I'm home. It's like I love the people. I love the sense of humor. I love how friendly people are, how warm the country is. You know, and I was there during the Olympics, and I end up feeling bored. It's like I watch those sports, and even though I respect all the athletes that are in there, the only way you could compare the sport to ours was if you get Mike Phelps, and when he jumped in the pool, you let it go a salty after him. You know? That would be the only one you could match in intensity. What we do with what they do. You know?
Yeah.
It's that's the reality. It's like get Bolt to run with a lion behind him, with a jaguar going after him. That would be the only way to match their sport to ours. You know. I go to this arena, and normally I have problems to sleep, but I go to watch those sports. I end up like taking a nap, you know. It's like our sport is the only one that you need two balls to play, you know.
Yeah.
And they better be made of metal. I tell you right now.
Now, Renzo, one of the questions that all the fans have is, you know, you never did fight in the early UFCs. You went to Pride instead in 1997. Did you ever have the option to fight on an early UFC card?
No, back then Horton was running the UFC. He was one of the owners, and Royce worked with him. So for him, it was more interest to have just Royce. In reality, the person who deserved to be in the UFC was actually Rickson. Rickson was the one who was the best fighter in the family back then. Was the one that earned and deserved the right to be fighting and be making his name in there. You know, and he wasn't awarded that privilege. You know, he had to go back, which ended up being a very positive thing. You know, it's like that's the beauty of life. What sometimes looks like you had a bad luck, in reality, just save you from an even worse luck. With the Rickson going looking for new markets in Japan, we end up having unbelievable a decade of fights in Pride, in rings, in punk race. You know, it's like we end up bringing the fight scene to Japan, and it took off, and it became back then the number one in the world. You know, we had unbelievable matches, unbelievable. We had the history for 10 years made that we will never be forget.
Oh, absolutely. And to this day, you know, people still talk about Pride Never Dies and things like that. There's so many great memories from Pride. You were obviously part of the first ever Pride event. You know, tell us about that. What was that like? And did you think it would be such a big deal, you know, Pride?
It was unbelievable, man. I tell you, it's like the Japanese culture, the Japanese way of seeing things. It's unique, and it was great for us to have the opportunity to go back to the cradle, the amazing, the martial art that we learned, and learn from them their habits. And then we could understand many things that we learned, many ways that our grandfather taught us. We learned once we understood their culture. You know, it's a great people, brave people, you know, great fighters. That explains why they are so great fighters. They are very passionate. And when you want to teach someone to be a good fighter, you teach them to love. You know, and the Japanese people have a unique ability to love, and that love makes you proud, you know, makes you never quit. And that's what makes a great fighter. And that explains a lot why pride, and that was the perfect name for the Japanese organization. Pride and love are part of the amazing Japanese culture. You know? And that was a unique decade because I had the opportunity to go 46 times to Japan. You know, and I had the chance to see Japan in ways that it's like I couldn't not even read in books about it. And it was amazing. It was a privilege. That's why I told you, I can die. You can lock me up, believe it. I'll have the experience that I had in life. I will walk out of a jail cell, a dark jail cell 20 years from now with a smile on my face. You know, and that's the reason, because I had access to things that I could never believe I could. I could never dream I wouldn't.
Wow.
It's like I still remember my teacher saying that fighting wouldn't take me nowhere. Or you were going to end up dead or in prison. You know, and I remember the first time that I look at Mona Lisa, the first time that I look at the work, the masterwork of Da Vinci and at the Louvre in France, I remember I thought of her. Every time I stepped in Japan and I saw different cultures, I went basically all over the world. This martial art took me all over the world. Took me to friends that I couldn't believe I could make it. You know, I saw things that it's like, it just allowed my soul to be better. You know, if there's a life after this one, believe it, I will shine. And all this, how words always come to me, like this is going to take you to death or to prison. And I don't understand how pleased I am to make her wrong, you know, to see her wrong. And the best is every time my book gets published in a different language, I would send a copy to her and ask her to send me a copy of hers once it gets published.
Oh, man.
Yeah, that's life. And I have an elephant memory. I never forget, my friend.
Anthony, the teachers sound the same as ours when me and Casper growing up. Now, let's get back to your matchup with Sakuraba. You know, in the Metamoris 5 countdown, Sakuraba mentioned that both of you have most likely learned some new tricks. Tell us, what's the biggest difference between the Renzo from 14 years ago compared to the Renzo Gracie of today?
It's like I'm more mature. Before I was rushing into things, like the reason why he was able to apply the arm lock was because I was trying to put the hooks in. I was trying to really be, even though it was 17 seconds to finish, I want to finish on his back, you know? And for the reason that I rushed things up, and I was able to improve with him, and he was one of the reasons that I was able to improve, and I want to prove that. I want to prove that I'm a better grappler, I'm a better fighter than I was when I had the opportunity to be matched up with him.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, the rematch, you know, obviously seems very important to you. It's not an MMA match, but what will your game plan be to deal with Sakuraba? And also, do you think that a lot of things that you learned from the first fight can carry over into the Metamoris rules?
Definitely. His grappling game, what made him so efficient in MMA was his grappling game. He was never a great striker, but he could strike, but his main thing was his grappling, you know, and that's what I'm going to be facing now. Actually, I'm going to be facing the toughest part of Sakuraba. You know, he's known for having heavy hips, a beautiful kimura coming from everywhere, you know, great leg lock. So it's going to be a challenge. It may be a bigger challenge than when I faced him at Pride.
Wow.
You know, but I believe this 14 years taught me a lot, and I'll be ready to represent and see all the knowledge that I learned over these 14 years after having the opportunity to fight him.
Now, Renzo, you know, you've got a bit of a busy schedule ahead of you. You also have a grappling match against Matt Hughes at the 2015 ADCC in Brazil. You've talked about returning to MMA. Are you still planning on fighting in 2015 in MMA?
Now. I'm already in shape. And then I have to fight Matt Hughes in September. I said, what am I going to do in the middle? Die of boredom? No fucking way. Get me some opponents. It's fighting time, you know.
So
Sorry, man. I I'm Brazilian and from Rio. I'm impatient. It's like if there's two cariocas from Rio, you have a party. You know, it's enough. So that's the reality. It's like I'm gonna be in shape now, and what I'm gonna do? Get out of shape and go back again? No.
Yeah.
I'm gonna try to find at least 2 matches in the middle, so I can have my fun and keep my shape up, so I can have a great match with my brother Matt Hughes.
And you think in terms of those fights, you reckon there'll be MMA fights or just strictly grappling?
Oh no, it's gonna be MMA.
Oh wow.
It's gonna be MMA.
Have you already thought about where you'd compete? Have you spoken to the UFC or anything like that?
Yeah, I'm gonna look to go for the UFC.
Oh.
I'll go sit down with those boys and have a talk. You know, I had the chat with Dana, and he said to me, Renzo, why you want to fight? I give you a check for you not to fight. I said to him, let's be honest, I want to fight for free.
Yeah.
And then he was like laughing. He goes like, yeah, Ken, you are amazing, you know. And we're gonna get together soon and see what we do. So if I'm feeling on the level, and I probably believe I can do good in there, for sure I'll be back in there. I have great training partners. I have Edson Barboza, I have Marlon Moraes, I have Ricardo Almeida, Igor Grego. So if I'm training with those boys, you know, I have my brother Frank Edgar, I train with Chris Weidman, Matt Serra. So if I can hang around with those boys well, I can keep myself alive. I believe I can keep myself alive with anybody in there, you know. So I'll be looking forward to train with my boys, and then if I can do well, I'll be back in MMA for sure next year.
Oh yeah, it's a dream too. We had a lot of those guys like Matt Serra, Ray Longo, and Chris Weidman in Australia just last week. I was going to ask you, Renzo.
Yes, my man. We create monsters. I call it Strong Island. It's Long Island where they're from. You know, that's the first academy I had when I came to New York, and after Matt started getting good enough to teach, we passed that school to him, and he's been running very successfully ever since. You know, and I was very glad with that. And look at the champions that are coming out of that, you know. And Ray is part of the family. There's the guy who trains us in our stand-up, and you see the boys getting better and improving every time. And I do hope one of my fights will be in Australia. It's like there's nothing that I would love more, you know, than to be in Australian soil, you know. And then after we go see some wombats and some kangaroos and have a lager. That was a pleasure.
Hey, man, we like our lagers here. I was just going to say, Renzo, you know, obviously if you're going to return to the UFC, I would assume it'd be the welterweight division. Have you had a look at any opponents or anyone that you think you'd like to fight?
No, I'm going to be looking to fight at 155.
Okay.
Yeah, because last time I was walking around at 168.
Oh.
So I'll probably will jump in at 155.
Any names that stand out? Any in particular that you'd like to fight?
I will ask them to match me with one of the 10 first ones.
Wow.
You know, make it. If they say the guys are too tough, I'll tell them to give them a warm-up fight. Then to give it to them as a warm-up fight.
Yeah.
Now, Renzo, we told the fans you're coming on the show, and we got a couple of fan questions, so I'll quickly go through them now. We got a question from Mike Hansen. He'd like to know your thoughts on the rivalry between Royce Gracie and Eddie Bravo at the moment. What are your thoughts on that?
It's fighting is what we do. If Eddie Bravo is a friend of ours, you know, it's a jiu-jitsu. He's a guy who fights under the jiu-jitsu flag. It's a representative of our beautiful art. But when we cannot fight, we don't have enemies to fight. We end up fighting among ourselves. This is a health discussion. It's a health, and to be honest, I think in the end, jiu-jitsu is going to gain from it. You know, it's just our way of dealing with things. Eddie Bravo and Royce are two great guys, and both represent the same flag. There's no reason for them to be arguing about. But believe it, if they got in a fight in front of me, I'll sit down and watch. And I hope I have a cold lager in my hand to enjoy. It's a very interesting thing. One time, Don Fry and Hallman got in a fight in the lobby of the hotel, and Baz Rutten was there. And as Baz Rutten, it's looking like as the fight began, I just turned my chair and I keep watching the fight, you know. And Baz went crazy to pull the fight apart. And I say, Baz, and as Baz was trying to pull the fight apart, Ben is kicking him straight in the head, trying to hit Fry. Boy, knock down Baz. Baz looked at me and goes, man, this kid hits hard. I say, he punches hard. I said, no, it's not a punch, but that was a roundhouse kick that put you on the floor. You know? And then he started laughing. I go, man, I say, he goes, what's wrong with you Brazilians? The guy got in a fight and you guys fix your chair to watch. I say, Baz, this is what we do. What's the chance you're going to see this fight? don't fry with Dennis Hallman.
Wow.
Never. So let me watch this. Let's enjoy. If the thing gets ugly, one of them goes out, we pull them out. But before, so, you know, and the second one was between Victor Belfort and Anderson Silva. They're in the lobby of the hotel in Abu Dhabi. They're arguing. They're almost fighting. I got there. I looked. There was nobody there. I look at them and I said, boys, just to make things clear, if you guys fight, I'm not pulling you guys apart. I'll sit down and watch because I'd love to see this fight.
Yeah.
You know, so they stop arguing right away and both walk away, you know.
Wow, that's
So
crazy.
it's like, how, you know, like, so if Eddie Bravo and Royce got in a fight and I'm next to them, I'll sit down and watch. And if one of them needs help to pull it, I will do it, you know, only in an extreme case. But besides that, that's what we do. We are fighters, so let them fight.
Just make sure you call us on Skype so we can watch as well, all right, Renzo?
Yeah.
We've got another fan question for you, Renzo. Matt MMA, his question is, your personal jiu-jitsu teacher, Sheikh Mohammed bin Zayed Al Nahyan, Crown Prince of Abu Dhabi since 1993. How did you two first meet, and how often do you still train together?
I was there this week. I just came back. I was there training.
Wow.
We train every day. We roll for an hour and a half. And I had the opportunity to roll with Pablo Popovich. Pablo Popovich is there now, he's his personal trainer now. And I had the chance to train with him every day for 12 days. I just got back, like 3 days ago.
Wow.
And it's an amazing guy. His view of jiu-jitsu is incredible. You know, he always brings the top guys to train, to roll, and to exchange knowledge. And he is an amazing jiu-jitsu guy, an amazing instructor, and his knowledge on the art is amazing. And every time I sit with him, you know, and I'm because it's my whole life I train my shooters to be 10 times better than I am. I want to learn from them. You know, I don't want to train someone to be under me for the rest of their life. Mm-hmm. It's like I don't create followers. I create leaders. This is what I do, and I create leaders who can create leaders. And he's one of my top creations, you know, and he was one of the most amazing students I had, because even though everything in his life pulls him away from training and teaching, it doesn't matter what happened, he puts his effort and his work every day. You know, since I met him. The first time I met him, he came to my academy and he didn't tell me who he was. And we had opportunity. I love his guard already. He was a purple belt coming from a very good friend of mine, a guy that grew up with me. So he was able to roll, and I saw him roll, and I like already his technique. And then later, after a couple of days, he told me he was a sheikh from Abu Dhabi, and he invited me to come to see his country. Back then, Abu Dhabi was like a village, nothing compared to what it is today, you know. And he was one of the main guys who helped build that country in what it is today. You know, he's not only built jiu-jitsu, but he built an amazing country, a fair country where people are treated with rights and equal, you know, and fairly, you know. And with that, he introduced jiu-jitsu to the school system. Right now, they have up to preschool. Soon, they're going to have it all the way up to high school. I just got a call from the campus of NYU. They're going to start a jiu-jitsu program in Abu Dhabi first, and then they plan to start here in New York. So it's amazing. Jiu-jitsu is reaching places that I cannot even believe, you know?
Wow.
Exactly what my teacher told me. Fight is going to take you to a cemetery or to a prison.
Now, Renzo, before we let you go, we're going to do a little thing we call the Submission Radio Tap Out Round. We throw a whole bunch of fun questions at you, and you mention, you answer with the first thing that comes to mind. Are you ready?
Yes.
Okay. Throughout your career, what has been your favorite fight?
The next one.
What's the secret to being a great coach?
Love. You got to love the people that you teach.
What was your favorite belt to be at in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu?
What's my favorite?
So sort of like a favorite belt, like color. What colored belt was your favorite when you did Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu?
Purple.
Purple belt was my favorite. See that? Purple belt was my favorite because it was exactly like if you become a good purple belt, you're going to be a good black belt. Yeah. And purple belt was exactly the belt that defined who you're going to be in the future.
Interesting. Now, Renzo, you've trained GSP before. Tell us, do you think he will return to fight again?
He will. I was with him 3 weeks ago, 2 weeks and a half ago, and he's already back training. He came over, trained a little. His knee's better now, and believe it, that guy's a champ. And I know him since he was 16, and he's been a champion since the first day, my man. And I don't see no quitting or no giving up on that boy. And even though he'll be out of the game for a little bit more, I don't believe that long because he was already moving like a cat again. But as soon as his knees 100%, he's back in the game. And he'll be the champion again.
I wish we moved like cats. Now, what has been your favorite match to watch at Metamoris so far?
It's like it's difficult to mention one in particular.
Mm-hmm.
Every single match you watch in Metamoris, it's unforgettable. It's unique. You know, it's amazing people with different skills, able to pull out amazing moves and amazing things. It's man, believe it, I'm so passionate for fighting. It's like if you ask me to compare the beauty of two women, I cannot.
Yeah.
It's like every woman is so beautiful in their own way that you cannot to compare that beauty. I'll be not polite.
Yeah. Well, Renzo, final question. You've been such an inspiration to so many people, but who's someone that you've always looked up to as an athlete? Who's inspired you?
I think that the biggest inspiration I had was my Uncle Hollis. He was my first teacher. He taught me until when he died. I was 14 years old when he died. And like everything that I am and that I tried to be was how I saw him. You know, and I see all his students, all the first generations of his students, the ones who got the black belt, they all saw him the same way. They all have the same admiration, and they all became very successful thanks to his teachings and his ability to motivate people. And my whole life, he was my inspiration. Like every night when I lay in bed, I pray to him.
Wow. Well, Renzo, it's been an absolute pleasure and honor chatting to you. I feel like we could sit here for hours and listen to you because you're such an interesting guy. Guys, don't forget, Renzo Gracie is, of course, competing at Metamoris 5 against Kazushi Sakuraba next weekend. It is going to be November the 22nd, but in Australia, because of the future time difference, it'll be the November 23rd. Don't forget to follow Renzo on Twitter at Renzo Gracie BJJ. Renzo, again, it's been a pleasure. Thank you so much for taking the time to be on Submission Radio.
Yeah, it was my pleasure. Send my love to the Australian people, all the Aussies. I love them all. And I'll be back there soon, maybe to do seminars or to have a laugh, and I hope to fight in the UFC for you guys. It'll be a pleasure. It'll be the greatest honor ever. Every memory I have from Australia, it's a great memory.
We're excited. Thank you so much, Renzo. Appreciate it.
Thank you, my brother. All the best to you boys. Bye-bye.
Bye.
See you, Renzo. Bye-bye.
Hey, this is the Ultimate Fighter 17 winner, Kelvin Gastelum. You're listening to Submission Radio.
Our next guest is coming off an amazing performance at UFC Sydney where he picked up an impressive submission win in front of his home crowd. He is known as the Hippo. Ladies and gentlemen, Anthony Perosh is on Submission Radio. Anthony, welcome back on the show.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for coming back, Anthony. It's always great to chat to you, especially given that we chatted to you about a week ago. Now, for those who have been living under a rock, obviously you scored a beautiful rear naked choke against Guto in a center, UFC Fight No 55, just the last week in Sydney. Tell us about what the last week has been like for you post-fight, and did the Hippo celebrate on Saturday night?
I was fortunate to have, really top camp and, stay healthy throughout and didn't really go into it just, with just a couple of minor, niggling injuries, but nothing that stopped me from fighting. And, I was feeling good and feeling confident fight week, and it's just good to show off some of my new skills on the weekend and get the win.
Absolutely, Anthony. Now, going into this fight, you were coming off a loss and you had an injury that sidelined you for a bit and took you out of another fight. I was just wondering, were there any added nerves or pressure going into the UFC Sydney for you?
Yeah, of course. Like you said, I lost my last one. So, even though I got a few wins behind me, you're never in a good position if you lose two in a row in the UFC. So I had that pressure, and then I had it was almost a year since I fought. So I didn't want to feel like I was rusty or anything. And then I guess the final pressure is it's great fighting in front of your home crowd, but at the same time, you don't want to do badly in front of your home crowd.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, last week post-fight, we spoke briefly about you obviously training with Jackson Winklejohn going into this one. Tell us a little bit more about how was that experience, and what did Greg and Wink have to say after they saw the great performance you put in?
Yeah, well, they sent me some text messages afterwards saying, congratulations and they're proud of me. So, that was, more than enough for me, getting those short text messages. And, but, I'll definitely, for all my future fights, I'm going to go there and do my training camp over there.
Absolutely. And, for the people that haven't had an opportunity to sort of look at our interview with you post-fight, tell us, what are some of the things that you took away from being at a camp like Jackson Winklejohn's? You mentioned to us that it was one of the best experiences you've had getting ready for a fight.
Yeah, look, the reason I go and the other fighter goes is, especially, I guess, from Australia or any country that's not America or Brazil or Canada, is over there. It's just a number of sparring partners. It's not so much the technique. I mean, you do pick up a couple of techniques and some good coaching, of course, from Jackson and Winklejohn. But it's really the number of sparring partners on the mat at one time. It's you're in Australia and there could be 10 or 12 people on the mat sparring, but maybe one or two of them are in the UFC, but over there it's like 20 or 30 on the mat sparring, and 3/4 of them are in the UFC. So that's really the main difference, is just go over there and spar as many people as possible and learn off as many people as possible.
Absolutely. And, you hit the nail on the head. They have so many guys there at Jackson Winklejohns. I mean, just off the top of my head, obviously, you've got John Jones, Alistair Overeem. You've got, obviously, Cowboy Cerrone, Arlovsky. You've got Aussie Carl Noak. Who are some of the main guys that you sparred with there?
Well, all the bigger guys weren't there, like, John Jones and Arlovsky and Alistair Overeem. They were just coming off fights or they're injured, so they weren't there the time I was there. So I fought a lot of heavyweights and light heavyweights who are on smaller shows in America, like the up and coming guys who will be in UFC probably shortly. But I guess the biggest name that was there on the mat just drilling, and I got to drill with him sometimes. Was Carlos Condit, he was there, and Diego Sanchez was there daily as well. And a lot of the smaller, like, the bantamweights and featherweights were there, but the class is split. Like there's so many over there that the first hour is like middleweight and above, and then the second hour is like welterweight and below type thing.
Not a bad gang to hang out with over there in Albuquerque. Now, after being in the headlines for UFC Sydney, the following day at UFC Brazil, OSP won in dominant fashion against Shogun. And one of the people that he called out after the fight was you and Fabio Maldonado. Now, Fabio will be getting knee surgery, so he looks like he'll be out for a little bit. Does the fight with OSP interest you?
Oh, look, I'm honored that he called me out, because he's ranked like 7 or 8 spots above me. Like, he rocketed into the top 10 by beating Shogun. But in reality, it makes no sense. Like, normally, if he's in the top 10, I'm still outside the top 15. It kind of makes great sense for me, because if I beat him, I'll be in the top 10. But it kind of makes no sense for him, after beating a former world champion, to call someone out like myself and Maldonado, who are still, even though we were on a couple of wins, we're still outside the top 15. So, look, we both accepted that much, but I don't think it'll happen, because, I don't think it makes any sense.
I'm also just curious, were you watching the event live when he called you out, or how exactly did you find out about the call out?
Where was I? No, I was actually at a BJJ competition, believe it or not.
Oh, wow.
So that Sunday, I had one of my top students who was fighting in a competition, like, had a super fight. So I actually went to a BJJ competition, and I was supporting him while the event was on. So I got actually like half a dozen text messages and Facebook messages saying that OSP called me out after his win.
How hilarious. Now, let's just say for a second that, the UFC do put this fight together. Looking at this matchup between you and OSP, how do you see that fight going? What are some of the advantages that you'd see yourself possessing in a fight like that?
Look, I lost to Ryan Bader last year, and Ryan Bader beat OSP earlier this year, and I would actually probably take the same approach. Like Ryan just used his strikes and took him down and controlled him for 15 minutes. So that would be my goal too. Why I'm not going to stand up with him for 15 minutes where that's his strength. My goal would be to take him down, and but I'm like a wrestler. I'm going to go for the submission.
Absolutely. And you mentioned that you don't see that fight going ahead. I'm just curious.
Oh, look, if it does, I'll take it. I'll take it if the UFC allows it. But I don't see it happening because it doesn't make any sense, and there's more. There's other people he could fight.
Yeah, I mean, I know it's a long shot, but have you been contacted by or had contact with the UFC at all, possibly setting this match up?
No, not yet. No.
And Anthony, when we spoke post-fight, you mentioned Fabio Maldonado. Obviously, he's going to have some knee surgery. He will have a knee surgery. He'll be out till 2015. So it's maybe not the best possibility for you right now. There are any other names in the division that you could see yourself possibly fighting, in the future, possibly here in Australia even? Yeah,
there's I guess there's a few people like above me and a few people below me. Lil Nogueira, I'd love to fight him. He's only actually ranked a few spots above me now. Maybe or below me, the Swedish Ilia Latifi.
Yep.
I think we're ranked around the same. And I think he just came off a loss. I think with Jan Blakovic, Polish guy.
Yep.
But yeah, I guess I don't really. But yeah, some guys like that would be good matchups for me.
Absolutely. Just hypothetically, if you could fight either guy, OSP, Little Nogueira, Ilia Latifi, or Jan Blakovic, what sort of time frame would you be looking at to return to the octagon?
I'd probably have I'd like the rest of the year off just to concentrate on my students and my MMA gym, and then probably start training after the New Year. So I could be ready February or March.
And can you just explain
or April, or maybe April at the latest?
Sure.
And can you just explain for people at home that sort of don't understand the life of a fighter? Like you mentioned, you've got a gym there that you have a pretty big part in. Is it difficult sometimes juggling fighting and running a gym and teaching classes and mentoring all these students that you have?
Yeah, look, I'm not complaining, but I'm actually not a full-time fighter because I do run 2 gyms, and I started teaching Monday night. So I fought Saturday, and on the following Sunday I went to a BJJ comp to support my student, and then Monday went back to teaching and taught 4 classes in a row. It's I guess I'm used to it, and I have a good business brain too, and to be good at business and also a good fighter, you have to be organized.
Yeah.
So I'm well organized, and when it comes to a fight, I just make sure that all my classes are covered with instructors, and everyone knows what to do, and then I can just concentrate on my fighting.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's obviously important. When you're rolling into a fight, the last thing you want is distractions and have to worry about things like that. Now, Anthony, I wanted to get a bit of perspective from you. You're a guy on the upswing of your career, a guy who many people are talking about. In contrast, however, is obviously Shogun Rua, who just got beaten. the way he was beaten was the first time in his career like that. Some people are talking about retirement, while Shogun seems content on fighting. What do you think about this? And as a guy who has fought for many years, what insight can you offer in regards to the punishment that the body takes after being in so many wars?
Look, Shogun is like 10 years younger than me, or maybe 8 years. I think he's 34. But when it comes, it's up to him. Like all these people who want him to retire, I guess because they're seeing other fighters like maybe like Chuck Liddell, who maybe lost 4 out of his last 5 by KO. I guess I don't want to see that, but because they don't want him to ruin his legacy, so to speak. But it's really up to the fighter. It's being a fighter, you never want to let it go. Like you always think that you've got one more match, and that you'll get back in there, and so what everyone's saying, it doesn't really matter. It's really just up to Shogun. It's, whether he says he wants to fight and he thinks he can fight, so no one's going to change his mind. It's up to him. But I guess because he started really early, like he was fighting when he was 18 years old, so he's had a professional career double mine. I started late. I didn't have my first fight till I was 31. So he's been fighting many years, and I guess that that is a disadvantage because that's a lot of hit to the head, shots to the head, and a lot of knockouts and concussions, and that does take its toll. But in the end, it's really up to him. I guess I if you ask me, I would like to see him retire too, because he's lost, I think, what's he lost, 3 out of his last 4 or something like that, or.
It's a good question. I'm not 100% sure on his record, but there's definitely quite a few.
I'd like to see him retire because look, who knows? Maybe he'll win the next 5, but he might lose the next 5, and no one wants to see that. Everyone wants to remember the Shogun, from Pride, and when he was world champion in UFC as well. That's the Shogun they want to remember. They don't want to remember, the one who got knocked out 5 times in his last 5 matches.
Well said, Anthony. Now, we let the fans know that you were coming on the show and got a couple of fan questions for you, so I'll kick it right off. Monkey Pride would like to ask you, if you could drop yourself into any fight in history and replace yourself with one of the fighters, which fight would you drop yourself into?
Wow, that's a good question. I don't know. I haven't really thought about that one. I just know the first thing that comes to mind is any title fight. So I'd love to fight for the title.
Absolutely, and I think all of Australia would like to see that. Got another question. It's from Count of SoCal. His question is, how were your emotions after the fight with Vinny, knowing that Vinny consistently talked bad about you?
Oh, look, I don't, I'm one of those fighters that I don't talk too much trash, but look, it was a great feeling. When I won, I didn't straight away think, oh, yeah, sucked in, you were talking all this shit about me and I won. That didn't really come to mind at all. It's like, getting a win in the UFC, especially after, had a bad loss before that, like that's what I was emotional about was getting back on the horse after a bad loss and returning the favor.
Sure.
And the last fan question for this one is from Sly Slick and Wicked. He wants to know what is your walking around weight when you're not fighting?
Well, it was about 107, 108. But for this last fight, I ballooned up to about 111, 112 kilos. Ooh, so I had to lose about 18 or 19, which was a little bit of a struggled at first, but I managed to finish strong. So, but I'm hoping that for the next fight, I won't get heavier than about maybe 107, 108, about 15 kilos over the light heavyweight limit.
Sure. I mean, hey, all's well that ends well, and you won the fight, so that's the main thing that matters. Now, Anthony, we're going to do what we did last time.
Yeah, for my weigh-in, I had to strip down naked for this one and weighed in like the maximum limit of 206 for this last one.
We were there live. It only added to the tension and the drama. So, I mean,
that's all right. Now I made it.
We're going to do what we did last time with the Anthony, the Submission Radio tap-out round. It's how we finish all interviews. We throw a bunch of fun questions at you, and you want to answer with the first thing that comes to your mind. Kind of like word association. Are you ready?
Yep, I'm ready.
All right, first question. What was the one thing you couldn't wait to eat after your fight?
Pizza.
If you could go back in time 20 years and give yourself one piece of advice, what would it be?
Get a boxing coach.
Anthony, finish this sentence. People don't know I...
play Angry Birds every day.
You have an amazing record. Tell us, if you could have one rematch out of all the fights that you had, which one would you choose?
Ryan Bader.
Now, if you could fight one person at the 56,000 Etihad Stadium in Melbourne, who would it be?
Oh, is this like a fantasy one or like a realistic one?
Ooh, why don't you give us a realistic one and a fantasy one? That way we cover both fields.
Well, we oh, excuse me. I'm feeling a bit sick after the fights hit me. But I guess the guys I mentioned before, for realistic-wise, like, Lil Nog or Ilia Latifi or Maldonado when he's better.
Sure.
And of course, fantasy, John Jones for the title.
Wow, that would be crazy.
He's in the same camp as you, Anthony. You can't say that. No, I'm kidding. I'm kidding. Now, what people might not know about you is when you were quite a lot younger, you were in Dallas, Texas, training with Carlos Machado for over 2 years on your jiu-jitsu. Give us a memorable story from your time in Texas.
It's way too. Look, you're probably on the spot now as well. Look, Texas is great. Like, definitely my favorite. Probably I'm biased because I lived there for 3 years, but it's a lot of good people and had a lot of good times there. And to this day, I still have about 20 friends I keep in contact with. But I think I need to get back there pretty soon.
No, absolutely. We've heard nothing but good things about Texas. Now, Anthony, any chance you'll be turning your beard into a handlebar mustache to raise money for Movember, just because they're awesome?
No, it's gone.
Oh, no.
I shaved Monday morning. I shaved and got a nice haircut, and I'm all nice and clean cut and nice and smooth now.
See, the beard was keeping you healthy. Get rid of the beard, you start getting
maybe.
Now, give us your Metamoris prediction. Renzo versus Sakuraba. Who wins this one?
I like Renzo, so I'll stick with the BJJ guy.
Yeah, I don't think anyone's picked Sakuraba so far on our show. Now, finally, if all goes to plan and you get matched up with OSP, how do you see that fight ending? What's your official prediction?
I will. I pretty much did all my favorite moves, this last weekend. So I'm going to aim to do that again, and take him down, get the mount, get the back, and choke him out. Let's see, second round.
Well, there you go, guys. It's in the record books. Anthony, it was an absolute pleasure watching you perform at UFC Sydney. Guys, you can catch him on Twitter at Anthony Perosh. Make sure you check out his amazing academies in Sydney. And Anthony, we'll be watching very closely. Hopefully this OSP fight happens, and hopefully it happens in Australia.
Great. Thanks so much.
So there you go, guys. Anthony Perosh, always a pleasure to have him on the show. And, a lot of respect for him, not only for picking up the win, but obviously coming on Submission Radio, not feeling the greatest. In case you didn't hear, he was sick after his fight. And just in general, really, really happy that he came on. And will be Really excited to see who he fights next and see if he does Australia proud. Now, let's get on to a few of the events that transpired over the weekend. Obviously, a lot of events in the MMA world. You had World Series of Fighting 15, you had Bellator 131, of course, UFC 180, which I'm going to say is the big one. Just before we start talking about a few of the fights that basically we'd like to talk about, we'll quickly mention World Series of Fighting. A few interesting happenings there. You had Dave Branch in the main event against Yushin Okami. Yushin Okami was knocked out by Dave Branch, TKO win. Very surprising, to be honest. I don't think anyone expected this one to end by TKO. You had Melvin Goliath taking on Justin Gaethje. That one ended, of course, in a decision. Very, very entertaining fight. Lots of bombs, lots of heavy hands. This is the fight, of course, that most people know. Melvin Goliath missed weight by quite a lot. And then previously to the fight, he was talking about how he's an A-League fighter fighting in the B-Leagues. Unfortunately for Melvin, it looks like he's going to be fighting the B-Leagues for a little bit longer. And then, of course, you had Jessica Aguilar winning and proving that she's one of the best women in 115 pounds. But let's talk about Bellator 131. Dennis, where do you want to start with this one?
Oh, man. Well, there's a lot of really great fights to quickly talk about before we get to UFC 180. But why don't we talk about the big one, the striker versus striker, the kickboxer versus kickboxer one, Cass?
Oh, you're talking about, of course, Joe Schilling against Melvin Manhoef.
Yeah, that's right. I think going into this one, a lot of people were wondering why put these guys up against each other in a Bellator event when it's probably likely that they'd fight each other in a Glory or a kickboxing event. But I think the allure of having the MMA rules really added something to the bout, and it was interesting to see how the guys were going to utilize it in their fight. Isn't that right, Cass?
Yeah, obviously this one is a really big treat for the fans. Everybody knew these guys were going to stand up. I honestly didn't think there was going to be too much of an MMA element here. It was just one of those fun fights that we get to watch, and I don't think people really cared whether it was a Bellator or a Glory or a K1 or wherever it was. People were just happy to see these guys throw down, and people expected a knockout. I don't think people did expect Manhoef to come out the loser. I think most people thought that Joe Schilling was a sacrificial lamb. I did see a few websites picking Joe Schilling as the winner. I really couldn't decide. But what transpired was a brutal, brutal knockout, possibly one of the best knockouts in 2014. We saw Joe Schilling take a tremendous amount of punishment in the first round. He hung in there, he hung tough, and he knocked Melvin out. Now, we've seen Melvin get knocked out before. It's kind of a thing that happens to him. We've seen him knock out guys as well. I mean, he's a really, really scary guy, but, he's either knocking guys out and really just absolutely destroying them, or he's usually on the receiving end of a knockout or a bad loss. So, the bad luck continues for Manhoef, but all in all, it was a great knockout and thoroughly enjoyed that one. Next up, another big one that I want to talk about was obviously Will Brooks versus Mike Chandler. Now, this is obviously the rematch. It was there for the lightweight title. This is a really interesting one. Had a lot of implications here. Dennis, what did you think of this fight?
Mike Chandler, going into this fight, had a bit to prove, and Will Brooks isn't really somebody that's gotten a lot of credit in Bellator. He's done some good things, but for some reason the promotional machine hasn't really gotten behind him. One of the things that I'm a little bit disappointed with the company about, I suppose, from that perspective. I think this fight was a big coming out party for Will Brooks in the sense that I don't think many people gave him as much of a chance as they did Chandler. Chandler obviously, showed off his skills in so many great fights in Bellator. The fight pretty much showed Chandler's, ability in the clinch, really dominating up against the cage a lot of the time. But, the conclusion of the fight was very, very strange. A lot of people have been talking about it like a zombie-type knockout. People didn't really realize how it all came about. Sort of at the end of the bout, it looked like he got tagged or something. He stood up, sort of waved around a little bit near the cage, and then Will Brooks came up to him and, finished him up with a bunch of punches while he was standing. It was waved off. It sort of looked like he was gesturing for something with his hands, like he was done, but it wasn't very clear what it came from. What did you think of the conclusion of the fight, Cass?
Well, he kind of went for, I'm going to say Uchimata. I'm pretty sure it's in Uchimata. Stock standard judo throw. It didn't exactly work. Looked like he may have hit his head on the way down. And then during the scramble, Will Brooks landed a really clean shot. Watching it live, it didn't seem like much, to be honest. It didn't look like something that would really sting Michael Chandler. But as he got up, yeah, it was really strange. It looked like maybe there was a foul. I thought, was there a nut shot? Was there an eye poke or something? And then he basically made some kind of wavy motion. And then, of course, Will Brooks came over, started throwing bombs, hit him with a knee to the head, and then the referee waved it off. Even as the referee waved it off, it wasn't really clear whether the fight was over or whether he stopped it because something happened, like some kind of eye poke or something like that. The referee, almost instantly, you could see Michael Chandler sitting down. They showed the camera. Jason Herzog was saying to Michael Chandler, "You stop defending yourself." And he did. He turned around. Hands weren't up or anything like that, just taking free shots. And Michael Chandler was absolutely protesting it, but it was just strange because when you look at the replay, it's clear that basically Michael Chandler got tagged. Don't know, still to this day, I don't know what the waving motion was, and then he got TKO'd. But it's just strange because he basically forgot it instantly. It's like he didn't know. I didn't realize he was that badly rocked, but it just seems like he forgot the whole thing.
Yeah, that's right. Absolutely agree with you there, Cass. Interesting to see what Bellator are going to do with Brooks next. I think he's really a commodity for the company. I think he's a tough kid, and I'd be interested to see if they can get behind him promotionally, really pump him out as the champion. He's a young kid. I like what he has to offer, and I think he showed people, I think a lot of people were impressed that he could hang in there with Chandler.
Well, I think, they absolutely need to get behind him. Obviously, he won the first fight. There's a lot of controversy. It was a split decision, people on both sides of the fence, and he won the interim Bellator lightweight championship, obviously Eddie Alvarez being the lightweight champion at the time. Now, Eddie Alvarez is gone. He's in the UFC, and interestingly enough, lost his first fight against Donald Cerrone. So now, Will Brooks is the official lightweight champion. So they really do need to get behind him, and they need to try and create a star out of him. He's not the interim champion anymore. He's the main man there. And, to beat Michael Chandler twice, which, funnily enough, both fights ended in controversy regardless, is a huge accomplishment. So they really need to make him the man there and get that promotional machine behind him.
Yeah, absolutely agree with you there. And for Chandler, again, like he said, a couple of controversial losses there, and a tough day at the office for him. Interesting to see when he comes back and what he looks like when he comes back, because he's still an exceptional athlete, and he still has a lot to offer to the Bellator brand.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Now, onto the main event. You had, obviously, Tito Ortiz against Stephan Bonner. People question whether this really was the main event. Obviously, there was no title on the line. The co-main event had the title match. And, of course, this one was pretty much all about getting the casual fans in on seeing Tito Ortiz against Stephan Bonner. What did you think of this fight, Dennis?
Cass, I watched the fight, and I watched, even the weigh-ins going into this thing, and I don't know what it was about it, but a part of me didn't like seeing it all. The weigh-ins, they seemed a bit, I don't want to say cheesy, but when you're used to a certain level with the UFC, I suppose you expect it when you watch other promotions as well. And I didn't exactly like what I saw from the weigh-ins onwards. I thought the fight itself was actually quite a quality fight. It had a lot more action than I sort of expected. I thought Tito looked pretty good in the fight. He looked pretty good. I thought Bonner, I don't know, he didn't really look himself. I guess the ring rust really kicked in for him. I thought there were a lot of good parts of the fight. Tito sort of did dominate Bonner when it came to the wrestling. There was a bit of stuff from Tito, like when the round ended, when he pushed Bonner away, and then after the fight when he was flipping him off behind his back, which I found kind of childish and I didn't really appreciate. I don't know if it was very sportsmanlike, even if they hated each other. And I don't know, it just came off a bit cheesy for me. I really didn't think it should have been the main event of that pay-per-view. And watching an event like UFC 180, and you got the young, hungry, competitive, best of the best fighters fighting each other, and then comparing it to that main event where I don't want to say these guys are sort of past it, but they're not in their prime. And if you compare the two events and you compare the level of fights that UFC 180 had to the main event at Bellator 131, I think it kind of, made it a little bit more difficult to watch. Overall, I thought it could have been a lot worse. And, I was pleasantly surprised at, how good Tito looked. What did you think?
Well, I mean, as far as Tito goes, to be honest, I think both men looked pretty slow. A lot of people have been talking about how the fight seemed like it was in slow motion. I mean, look, I was to a degree impressed with Tito Ortiz. Of course, he put together a lot of things. You know, he was striking, he was out wrestling Bonner, but I think a large part of that was because Bonner, to be honest, didn't look that great. I think when we saw Tito Ortiz against Alexander Shlemenko, I think Tito Ortiz looked pretty slow there. There was a bit of ring rust there, and I think that fight maybe shook a little bit of that off. So he looked better than he did in his previous fight. You know, Bonner was throwing a lot of bombs, but I think he, for the most part, had more ring rust than Tito Ortiz. He said after the fight that, to be honest, it wasn't really all that he expected. You know, he thought it'd be fun to come in there and get his head cracked open, but in all honesty, it really sucked. It didn't look good for Bonner at all. And to be honest, I don't know where this split decision came from. He didn't win any rounds, in my opinion. I think it was all Tito Ortiz. Having said that, I mean, it's tough to sort of say where Tito Ortiz goes from here. I can certainly see him having these fun fights, etc. But you know, I think when he comes up against more sort of the elite of the division, maybe your King Mo, your Rampage Jackson, Emmanuel Newton, I don't know how competitive those fights are going to be. I mean, you're talking about a guy that obviously in Stephan Bonner that had about 2 years off on the shelf. And then Tito Ortiz came in and beat him. So it was a fun fight. You know, Tito was being Tito. He had the shirt at the end saying that his mouth, I think it was something about his mouth cashing checks that his ass couldn't, you know, something like that. And then, of course, there was the flipping off. So whether Tito Ortiz is in the UFC or in Bellator, you know, some things just never change. But as far as a main event quality fight, it's a bit of a tough one, you know what I mean? And, you know, there was obviously a lot of people in the Bellator arena. I'm just curious, you know, what those people thought and if they watched UFC 180, comparing those two pay-per-views afterwards.
Yeah, it would be really tough. And, you know, I absolutely agree. You know, it kind of reminds us that it might be a good thing that Stephan sort of stepped away from fighting, because the Stephan Bonner that I know that all of us loved was the guy that could go in there and sustain just ridiculous amounts of punishment and stay in the pocket. And, you know, like he mentioned in the post-fight speech, he just didn't look like the same Stephan Bonner. And he just didn't look the same. It just wasn't the same type of fight. And yeah, it was a little bit difficult to watch. I don't think we'll be seeing Stephan fight anytime too soon in Bellator again, but I'd be interested to see what they're going to do with him. But I absolutely agree with you, Cass. It'd be interesting to see what they do with Tito from now. Obviously, a fight with a guy like King Mo would be quite risky because it's probably likely that Tito would lose. But I suppose they have to go back and see what's happening with the division. Yeah, it was definitely interesting to see. I suppose if I was in Bellator, I would put the Will Brooks fight as the main event, because those are the two young guys that I want to see, you know, finish out the event as the future of the event. And I think that a Tito Ortiz fight would be great as a co-main or something like that.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you can still promote the pay-per-view. You can still have the posters more or less the same and promote the hell out of Tito Ortiz and Stephan Bonner just to get those casual fans in there. But I absolutely think that Will Brooks and Michael Chandler should have been the main event. It was the far better fight anyway, so I think it would have been good to sort of get Tito and Bonner out of the way and get the title fight out there, you know, give the title the respect that it deserves, especially because it's basically, you know, it's an interim title going into an undisputed title. I think that definitely deserves a certain level of respect. And just going back to Stephan Bonner, I mean, I don't know what they're going to do with him now. Like, I don't think I don't see how he can come back. Who are they going to put him up against? You know what I mean? He's obviously not going to be fighting an Emmanuel Newton. I don't think he's going to be fighting Rampage Jackson. That would not be good for Stephan Bonner, to say the least. You know, like, at least in the UFC, he could have some fights against some guys that may not necessarily be the elite, but still well-known stars. And in Bellator, you can't really have that. So to be honest, I think this is the only fight that he could have really had in Bellator. So I hope, for Stephan Bonner's sake, I hope he continues to make money on the stock market, and he maybe stays away from the cage, in my opinion.
Yeah, I agree with you. You know, absolutely agree with you. And hopefully, yeah, like you mentioned, he doesn't have too many more fights, because you don't want it to damage the legacy. He's got such a great legacy, and you don't want some of these new fans that have just come along to sort of see him in a different light. But
and I was just going to say, and you know what? He doesn't need it. He's a smart guy. He's making money on the stock market. There are some fighters that can't do anything other than fight. You know, they may not be good actors. They may not be the fittest guys, or whatever the case is, and they need to go in and take punishment. Stephan Bonner's not that type of guy. He's got a family. He's got a wife. You know, he can wake up and sit in his computer and make money. So I hope that that's what he chooses to do.
Yeah, and he's a really entertaining guy as well. Anything that he chooses to do in terms of commentary, or I
Yeah.
know he does some commentary already, but shows like I know Chael became a sports analyst, on ESPN, stuff like that, writing a book, doing his own stuff. He's such an artistic guy. I think, yeah, sky's the limit for Stephan Bonner, but fighting's definitely not necessary for him. But the other big card, Cass, I suppose the big stories really came from UFC 180. We'll be breaking down a few fights from the card, but before we get into those fights, Cass, what did you feel about the overall atmosphere of the event? How did you feel when you watched it?
Are you talking about UFC 180? Or are you talking about Bellator?
180.
Yeah, 180 was pretty cool. I felt like it was a big party that it went on for quite a while. I was obviously watching straight from the early prelims. A lot of fighters that I've never heard of, I'll be completely honest. But I liked it. What did you think?
Well, this one really held a special occasion for the Australians. We had friends all over Victoria going to pubs or bars, and this was in an afternoon on a Sunday, and they were packed out. I think Australia really got behind this card, obviously coming off the UFC Sydney event with me and Casper covered last weekend. This is a great back-to-back thing, having Mark Hunt in the main event, an adopted Australian son in many ways. I think a lot of people were excited for that title to possibly come back to New Zealand and Australia, and that really brought a level of atmosphere and goosebumps going into that event, and also having three or four fights that usually would just headline fight nights. I think it was nice to actually have a main event card with three or four fights that are really fun to watch. And I think that's something that got me, because I haven't seen a UFC card like that in a while.
Yeah, absolutely. And considering all the injuries that happened prior to this, obviously Diego Sanchez out, Cain Velasquez out, there was parts where you'd worry, would it still be a good card? But if you looked at that card, there was a lot of good and interesting fights nonetheless. I don't think it really needed necessarily Diego Sanchez and a Cain Velasquez. It was still a really good fight. Not that I would have complained if that was still on there. I think some cards get really screwed up by injuries, and this wasn't one of them. I think it was a really good card altogether. Right from the get-go, in the prelims, man, Jessica Eye versus Leslie Smith, that was a really great fight. Obviously, Jessica Eye previously, or just a few days ago, saying how she's ready for Ronda Rousey, and she certainly looked great in this fight. I mean, I don't know if Leslie Smith is necessarily the measuring stick for that, but yeah, Jessica Eye looked really good, really crisp, really fast, just really good in general. And that ear on Leslie Smith, Jesus Christ. Lots and lots of respect for Leslie. Obviously wanting to continue to fight, trying to get the crowd behind her. Definitely didn't want it to end. But man, if you saw that ear, it was like an open book. It was like a creaky door just pouring blood. It was absolutely nasty. Obviously featherweight fight, the main event of the prelims, you had Yair Rodriguez, Leonardo Morales, split decision for the new featherweight Ultimate Fighter. What do they call it? Ultimate Fighter Latino, or Ultimate Fighter Latin Nations winner. So the fact that there was obviously the Ultimate Fighter winners were crowned on the prelim cards, it was pretty crazy, and it just goes to show how big an event this was.
Yeah, absolutely agree with you. And, those cards really did deliver, like you mentioned at the prelims. The E was crazy. And, I suppose the big three fights was really something that was interesting. Before we get into them, how about the yelling match between Dana White and Joe Rogan at the end of the prelims going into the main event? The music was pumping so loudly, you just heard Dana White and Joe Rogan yelling as loudly as they could in the microphone. It was pretty hilarious. I think a lot of people had a good time on Twitter with that one.
Yeah, I love that. That stuff always cracks me up. It was a good way to start it was a good way to sort of end the prelims and start the pay-per-view. Now, as far as the three big fights we want to talk about, just to sort of end this week's show, we'll start with the featherweights. You had Ricardo Lamas against Dennis Bermudez. Now, this fight, it was one of the most sort of fights that I was excited for coming into UFC 180, because it had big implications. Now, the guy who won it wouldn't necessarily get a title shot, but would be immediately slotted into contendership. Ricardo Lamas, previous challenger for the featherweight title, and Dennis Bermudez coming in on a massive win streak, who was kind of like the dark horse, didn't get the credit he deserved. And I think it was a really sort of pick 'em fight. Obviously, Ricardo had faced better competition, but Dennis Bermudez was the kind of guy where he won fights that he necessarily wasn't supposed to. What did you think of this fight, Dennis?
Ricardo is an alternative name I use on Saturday nights, Castle. But, I had in my picks Dennis Bermudez winning this one. I really became a huge fan of Bermudez and his ability athletically to do things in the ring. I thought this guy was really the future of the division, and I thought, the fight was really neck and neck. I thought, wow, this is going to be a great one. Obviously, the way that it finished, it just blew my mind. That guillotine from Ricardo Lamas, it was so quick. I was so impressed. Bermudez, he looked good, but fighting in Brazil, it's not that easy. I was watching a lot.
You mean Mexico?
Exactly, Mexico. Sorry about that, guys. Mexico, it's not easy, and I was watching a lot of the embeddeds and the videos going into it and the way the guys lived and stuff, and it just, I don't know, if you're not used to it, it might be a bit difficult. Whereas Lamas, he's got a heritage there. I suppose he felt more at home there with the people behind him, and I'm not sure if that affected Dennis in any way, but yeah, I don't know. I was really, really impressed with Lamas, and I thought it was bad luck for Bermudez. He looked devastated when he got beaten. But yeah, it's great to see Lamas back in contendership. What did you think of the fight, Cass?
Yeah, I mean, look, as far as the preparation for Dennis and the altitude and things like that, I don't think it really affected him at all. I mean, Dennis has great cardio. You saw in the UFC embedded, he was sprinting on a treadmill. I think he had like 24 minutes left, and he's talking to people, he's laughing, joking. I mean, I hate treadmills. I hate him absolutely. I don't like running. I'd rather lift all day as opposed to treadmills. And this guy's, running at altitude in Mexico and chatting to camera guys. So, I mean, cardio was there. I think Dennis Bermudez showed up, and I think he was very ready. He looked really good. I just think Ricardo looked a lot better. I mean, he dropped Dennis basically with a jab. Ricardo, I believe, had the speed advantage. Obviously, Dennis couldn't take him down. That was another thing. Dennis Bermudez, he does really well when he mixes it up against opponents. He's got that strong wrestling base, but yeah, that's the thing. So does Ricardo. And I think maybe shook him a little bit that he couldn't take Ricardo Lamas down. And man, that guillotine, Ricardo spoke to us, I believe it was 2 weeks ago, and we asked him what's your go-to move in training. He said guillotine, and that's exactly the way he finished this fight. So, prior to this, I was basically saying whoever wins, they need to call somebody out. Now, Ricardo Lamas, he did say that's not his style. He doesn't want to be the clown. He doesn't want to be like Conor McGregor. I really think it's a little bit of a missed opportunity. He needs to get on that mic. He needs to say something. I was kind of looking forward to seeing if Dennis Bermudez would as well, because he's been saying that he would for so long, and absolutely he's devastated. I mean, if you're coming in with one fight under your belt, say a win, and then you lose, it's like, well, almost feels like you didn't lose too much. But if you're coming in there on like an 8-fight win streak and then it gets snapped, man, that must be devastating. He's a guy that people were overlooking already. People are going to overlook him even more now. The fact that you've got 8 wins in a row under your belt and people still aren't saying, hey, you should be challenging for the title. I mean, this is only going to hurt his chances even more. I really like Dennis Bermudez. It's always great when he comes on the show. And, I mean, he's, like you said, Dennis, you thought he could be the future of the division. He still can be. He's still a really young guy. He's got a lot of tools. It wasn't his night tonight. I think he can bounce back and put together another streak. As far as Ricardo goes, I mean, that dude was always a killer, and he continues to be. So it'll be interesting who they put him up against next, and what his road to the title is going to be like.
Yeah, exactly. And I'd love to see Bermudez fight Poirier next, but I don't know what the deal is with the rankings and stuff. Both guys coming off losses, and both guys could make a really compelling matchup. Possibly a matchup that will get him back in the mix, with a win. So we'll see what the UFC does with him. But yeah, absolutely agree with you. It was a tough night out for Bermudez, but yeah, Lama's just looking amazing.
Yeah, you know what? That's actually a really good fight right there. I would love to see that. Poirier and Bermudez, both guys who were close to title contention, going out. I'd love that. Speaking of title contention, you've got Kelvin Gastelum, who was basically undefeated coming into that fight, a fighter that people were talking about, being tested. Will he be good enough to possibly slot in that contendership, slot in the top 10? Now, Jake Ellenberger pretty much on the opposite. He's the guy that people were talking about a few years ago, being the man to defeat GSP, one of those new breed welterweights, up there with guys like Rick Story and Rory McDonald. And in the last few years, that has absolutely dwindled. So he's a guy who really had to basically win this fight to see if he can hang in there. And unfortunately, didn't go that way for Jake Ellenberger. Another loss. I believe this is now 2 or 3. I think this is 3 in a row, actually. He lost to Rory McDonald in a really boring fight. He lost to Robbie Lawler in just basically being outclassed. And now another one to Kelvin Gastelum. Man, what did you think of this fight, Dennis?
Well, I thought Ellenberger looked really good standing. I thought his striking really improved, and he was, popping out the jab a lot. With something that not a lot of MMA fighters do. And obviously, he trained with Ronda's coach for this one and the last one as well. So you could see his striking's coming together. But the way that KG finished that fight out just blew my mind. I believe Ellenberger tried to slam him, then KG sort of reversed it, came around the back. The thing that really kind of not shocked me but impressed me, I suppose, was when he went for that choke, and before he put those hooks in, as he was coming around the back, that choke was already deep in. And when he put the hooks in and they were on the ground, it was all over. It was so deep. I was very impressed with Gaslam. He's just an amazing kid. He's young. He's improving. I really felt bad for Ellenberger because, like I said, on the feet he looked really, really good at a lot of points in the fight. But unfortunately, these things happen, and that's why they call it MMA. Things can happen at any moment. What did you think of the fight, Cass?
Yeah, look, well, when we spoke to Ellenberger again, I think we spoke to him about 2-3 weeks ago, he was saying how one thing that he's learned is that he doesn't do well when he moves backwards. Against Robbie Lawler, he moved backwards, and he didn't do very well. And I think you're right, he did pump that jab out a lot, and I did like that. I think he seemed fairly calm. He's not the type of guy to really lunge in there anymore. He's kind of changed as a fighter. Jake Ellenberger used to basically bum rush guys. He was a real bully. Now, it's almost like he's a counter striker. I think, in the first opening frames, he was somewhat busy, and he hit KG with some really hard shots. But I think there was a lot of parts where he was moving backwards. And Kelvin Gastelum, he's a guy that pressures you, man. We saw it against Uriah Hall. He just, came and came and came. And even those few moments where Ellenberger backed him up a little bit with those hard shots, he kept coming and coming. He got his composure, he circled out, and then he came for Ellenberger. And I think that's basically become one of the keys to victory against Ellenberger. If you pressure the guy, he does fade a little bit. And, it sucks because the guy had so much promise. And again, he's another guy. He's young. He can certainly bounce back. But I think more than anything, this is a huge coming out party for Kelvin Gastelum. A lot of people questioning him. A lot of people saying, is he really as good as he is? I get it. He's undefeated, but is he really going to be a title contender? Man, I remember watching this fight thinking, okay, KG's winning, but if he wins the decision, he's going to get into those territories of, yeah, he won, but how long will he keep winning for? He got tagged by a few punches. How long will it be till somebody capitalizes and, either puts him away? And, a guy like Kelvin Gastelum, sometimes when people are coming up in the division, they fall into that trap of being just very well-rounded, but not really great at anything. And pretty much right at the end of the first round, the way he snuck in that rear naked choke, man, that was incredibly impressive. Pretty much from the scramble to rear naked choke was almost one fluid movement. I remember watching Jake Ellenberger slam him. I got excited. I was like, ooh, German suplex, awesome. And then Kelvin Gastelum was basically like, nah, I'm not having any of it. Straight away into a scramble. And I think Jake Ellenberger was a little bit surprised because a move like that by Kelvin Gastelum takes a lot of energy to get out of a scramble like that. And if you screw it up, if you don't get out of it, if you don't explode with a lot of energy, you're gonna basically end up on your back. You're gonna waste a lot of energy, and it was a 3-round fight. So I think the way that Kelvin Gastelum got out of that and took Ellenberger's back and choked him out, incredibly impressive. Dude is absolutely for real. And I'm just sort of looking at the top 10, Dennis. In terms of what's next for Kelvin Gastelum, what do you think? Who's someone that he should verse?
Well, that's a tough one. So many names in the division. And the thing is, Ellenberger, he was really up there in terms of, the guys that he's fought, losing, but not, getting smashed by guys like he lost against Robbie and he lost against Rory, but at the same time, he wasn't just destroyed. He was dominated, but not destroyed. So it'd be really interesting to see who they put him up against. Who do you have there in the top 10 that sticks out to you, Cass?
Well, I was going to say, in terms of Ellenberger, I mean, some people may say, oh, he's done. It's over for him. Well, I would question that and say, is that the case, or is it the fact that he's just gone up against a murderer's row? Look at who he's lost to, Rory McDonald. I mean, that guy is a possible future champ. He's certainly a future title shot challenger. And then you got Robbie Lawler. I mean, he's fighting for the title. And then you've got Kelvin Gastelum. I mean, that guy's obviously got a lot of promise. And we don't know exactly how good he is, but who knows? He may be a future champion. And Ellenberger's still got, wins over Nate Marquardt, brutal KO. Jay Heron, decision. Martin Kamen, he lost to. Diego Sanchez, he beat. Jake Shields, absolutely starched. Sean Pearson, John Howard, Mike Pyle. So he's got a lot of wins under his belt. I think it can definitely turn around for him. As far as who's next for KG, I'm just looking at the welterweights. Now, you've obviously got Robbie Lawler, who's tied up. Johny Hendricks is tied up. Rory McDonald will fight next for the title. I'm thinking, and Matt Brown, I don't think Matt Brown has an opponent just yet. Hector Lombard has an opponent. I'm thinking maybe Tyron Woodley or a Carlos Condit. You got Tyron Woodley, who's obviously a wrestler, and he's a power puncher. I think that might be a fun fight. And that'd be a very good sort of test for Tyron Woodley. People often question his cardio, and obviously KG keeps coming and coming. That'd be a very good test, I believe, for Tyron Woodley. Or you've got Carlos Condit. You put KG up against an elite striker, which maybe doesn't have the greatest takedown defense. I think either of those guys, and if he beats one of those guys, I'd say he'd be pretty close to a title shot there. What do you think, Dennis?
Yeah, I think those are some great matchups, Cass. Absolutely agree with you. KG, like you mentioned, proving that he's the man, and just who knows what the future holds for this young guy. And, with Jake Ellenberg, I think the UFC need to give him a little bit of a break, really sort of give him somebody who's not sort of up there and, really let him show off what he can do. Also, Glendale Fighting Club where he trains, maybe it's time to switch up where he trains. I know that Ellenberger likes to do elements of his training across a whole bunch of places. That's what he's always done. But perhaps if he goes to one camp and just does everything there, maybe focuses on some of those other areas he's having issues with, maybe that might help. But definitely his next fight, maybe if he loses his next fight, that might be it for him in the UFC. And I'd hate to see that because he's such an interesting guy to watch.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, onto the main event. I mean, this fight basically had me, I had goosebumps as these guys were walking out. I mean, I was basically gassed. That's how excited I was for this fight. Mark Hunt, we don't even need to get into a Cinderella story. Fabrizio Verdun, both of these guys were in Pride. Both of these guys have had such long and storied careers. To be honest, it was one of those cases where either man, whoever won it, would have deserved it a lot. I mean, these aren't young guys that got in there a couple of years ago, some young bucks making a name for themselves. These are very established guys, and I think both of them are people who no one ever thought they'd be holding titles. Mark Hunt especially, the way he entered MMA, I don't think anyone expected him to be any kind of champion. And Fabrizio Verdun was kind of, I wouldn't say journeyman, but he's the kind of guy who had so much potential and for a long time didn't necessarily live up to it. So I think, what did you think of this fight? Just even the opening moments, Dennis?
Well, in the opening moments, I enjoyed Mark Hunt's walkout music. I believed in the embedded. He was talking about how he was walking past the church and he heard a song and he wanted that to be his entrance music. Not sure if that was his entrance music, but he looked calm. He looked great. I was feeling it. I think you and me, we spoke a bit, during that fight. And one of the things we mentioned to each other was, even though there's been a lot of great UFC events, it's probably been a little while since you and me have gotten real goosebumps before a fight. And I was genuinely excited for this one. It was an example of a match that's been put together really well. And it reminded me of what fighting was all about. And that was not knowing what's going to happen next and just sort of sitting there, just not knowing what to anticipate and just being really excited to see what happens next. I suppose it sort of took me back to, I am a fan now, but obviously you and me, Cass, we cover the sport as well. This is our profession as well, but it really took me back to sort of when I started watching the UFC or when Brock Lesnar used to come out and fight and I used to get excited. So it put me in that mindset. What about you?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Like I said, I had massive goosebumps. I don't know what it was about Mark Hunt's song, but there was something, I want to use the word relating to it. I don't know. It was just eerie. Something about it. He was just the common man coming out. It was the perfect entrance, in my opinion. Fabrizio Verdum, kind of the polar opposite. Not to say there was anything bad, but he was just kind of happy coming out. Didn't seem like there was too much. I mean, I didn't feel the story in terms of Fabrizio Verdum coming out, but there still was some. Obviously, he was there for the last couple of months. Mark Hunt got the call. I believe he had about 3 weeks to prepare, a lot of weight to cut, and you could see Mark Hunt was visibly bigger than usual. I mean, he never steps in the octagon. It's never a case where you look at him and think, damn, Mark Hunt looks small. But I think he looked a lot bigger than usual. I don't know how tough the weight cut was. But in terms of the fight, man, Mark Hunt was absolutely dominating the first round. He basically dropped Fabrizio Verdum. Didn't look like Fabrizio was all that hurt. I think he was playing possum a little bit. And I know Joe Rogan, during that fight, was saying a lot about how, he hurt him with that uppercut. I'm going to disagree with Joe Rogan. I think throughout the first round, even though Mark Hunt landed a lot of shots, I think Verdum looked absolutely fine. I don't think he was as hurt as Joe Rogan was saying. I think he was taking those shots. People forget, Verdum has an incredible chin. He got brutally knocked out by Junior Dos Santos. I think that's the only time he's ever been knocked out in his whole career. He has a very good chin on him. And he's gone up against a lot of good strikers, a lot of knockout artists. Yeah, look, Mark Hunt was dominating. I was freaking out when Mark Hunt got into Fabrizio's Verdum guard, as I think most people were. It was like, what are you doing? You crazy, man. It was insane. But that's the thing, Mark Hunt, he seems like he has absolutely no fear. And he's done that before. We saw him against Stefan Struve, who taps out multiple guys. He got in his guard. He survived, ended up winning the fight. That first round was basically teeth gritting. How did you feel in that one, Dennis?
Yeah, absolutely. And you kind of had that feeling of, oh, crap, Hunt might actually take this one on 3 weeks' notice. Like you mentioned, he looked a little bit bigger. 3 weeks' notice in a place with altitude versus, Verdum, who's been there for over 2 months and looked great. It was just like, especially after the interview that he did with Ariel Helwani, where it sort of looked like he had a few issues going into the fight. Outside the octagon, it didn't really even look like he cared about the fight. I was taken back. And he said to us last week or the week before when we interviewed him that, his defense to versing a black belt on the ground is punching him in the face, and there goes their black belt. And that's exactly what happened in that first round. At the end of that first round, I think Fabrizio went back to his corner, and, he was a little bit like, oh, crap. And, Mark Hunt went back to his corner, and, they were sort of like, all right, here we go. We can win this thing. One of the things I did notice, of course, is, Mark didn't really have as much of a training camp going into this one, and he was visibly taking deep breaths straight away in that first round, which was a little bit of a concern to me, but that was my thought of the first round.
Yeah, I think coming to that second round and in between rounds, you could see that Mark Hunt was pretty tight, and he's always been the kind of guy to really be rather conservative in his approach to MMA. He circles out a lot when his opponents come in close. He'll basically use that left hook to keep him at bay, and then he'll cover distance very quickly and use punches. Doesn't really throw too many flurries, throws very sort of, unless he's got the guy really hurt. And even oftentimes when he does hurt the guy, he won't necessarily jump in there. He's very cerebral with his approach. And in this fight, he especially needed to be that way because obviously, like you said, he had the much smaller gas tank in this fight. And I think by the second round, even though he was winning, I mean, I was kind of looking at it like, wow, Mark Hunt might actually win this by decision. But it was kind of like a ticking time bomb. The longer the fight went, the more it would be in Fabrizio's favor. I was just sort of waiting for the moment where Fabrizio might either pull guard or I didn't see him taking Mark Hunt down, but somehow the fight ends on the ground and Fabrizio going away with the submission. What happened though? I don't think too many people expected it all. Mark Hunt getting knocked out by Fabrizio Verdum. Not cleanly. It wasn't, he wasn't knocked out cold, but that was absolutely insane. Obviously, for what happened basically was Fabrizio Verdum was faking takedowns, really, really sloppy looking takedowns, to be perfectly honest. And Fabrizio's kind of known for it. He's known for going for very desperate looking takedowns. Now, he basically made it look like he was going for a takedown and then sort of jumped up with that flying knee. That was absolutely insane. What went through your head when that happened, Dennis?
I don't want to be a backseat MMA coach, but one of the things about Mark Hunt is, I suppose, he's a man that, is very set in his ways. And one of the things that he does is he's very sure of his striking game. And one of the things that comes with that is he keeps his hands very low because he doesn't mind people tagging him He believes in his chin. But what happened in that situation in the second round was he just had no cardio. Now, what people know that know anything about fighting, they might know that if you don't have much cardio, that actually affects the probability of you getting knocked out. Because if you're taking deep breaths, if you don't have much air in your system and you get smashed in the face with a knee like that, you're more likely to get put on the ground and possibly knocked out for a few seconds. His hands are by his waist. It was, what went through my mind was I couldn't believe it. I'll be honest. I couldn't believe it. I couldn't believe that it was the way that Fabricio wanted. And especially, being in the mindset of, right, here's Mark and he's going to knock Verdum out now. It just blew my mind. I know that a lot of Australians had their hearts broken and Kiwis had their hearts broken by that. I know that Mark Hunt was very disappointed. And, I know I spoke to his manager and, the manager mentioned how disappointed all of them were. I think that the way that he lost was especially disappointing to Mark. And, especially with his hands being down to his waist also didn't help. Obviously, something that's easily prevented if you have your hands up. But also, Verdum did a good job with that knee. So, yeah, big kudos to Verdum. And, yeah, just absolutely shocking from my perspective to see Mark, get put on the ground like that. What went through your head when you saw a guy that, wasn't likely to be knocked out lie on the ground there, and especially after such a dominant first round?
Yeah, it was like the dream was shattered. I think a lot of people who basically are the common men, much like yourself and myself and a lot of people out there that probably listen to the show, it's very inspiring to see a guy like Mark Hunt, come this far. And it's even more inspiring where the fairy tale ends on a good note. Unfortunately, in this case, once that knee hit, it was like that whole aura of inspiration was kind of shattered. I think the fact that Mark Hunt stayed upbeat in the post-fight interview, for a second I didn't think there was going to be an interview. I think the fact that he was so upbeat kind of lessened the pain a little bit, and it was still, you could still be happy for Verdum because obviously that guy deserved it. In terms of, keeping his hands low, I think Mark Hunt had to keep his hands low, to be honest, just because Fabricio was constantly going to be going for the takedown. Everybody knew that Fabricio wanted to take this fight to the ground, despite his improved striking. So I think Mark kind of had to have those hands low. And because Fabricio shot in, or he made it look like he was shooting in, I'm not surprised that Mark Hunt's hands went down. I just think Fabricio, as Alistair Overeem said, he's a tricky bastard. He really is a tricky guy. He's a guy that I would never, ever, ever bet against because he's the guy that's going to screw up your multi-bet. He shot in, he faked it, he faked that takedown, and then went up with a knee. I think that's brilliant strategy. It's very smart. We saw what he did against Fedor Emelianenko, where he really sort of lured him in. He's a very smart fighter. And I'm going to go out on a limb here. If you look at Fabricio Verdum's record, if you look at the people he's beaten guys like Fedor Emelianenko and Antonio Nogueira. Those are guys that people have considered the best of the best at one time or another, and he's beaten both of those. Now, I believe the guy that's now considered the best is Cain Velasquez. I don't think many people would argue with that. He is currently the best heavyweight in the world. If Fabricio Verdum beats this guy, I would be saying Fabricio might be the greatest heavyweight ever. What do you think, Dennis?
Well, I absolutely agree with you. If he beats Kane, then I guess the next big matchup for him would be Junior Dos Santos if he gets through Stipe in December. But yeah, he's a tricky guy, and he's somebody that I like to watch because he constantly improves. It really looked like he took this fight seriously. But the other thing that people need to really think about is just, what Mark Hunt went through to get into this fight. 3 weeks preparation for a fight is ludicrous. Going to a country like Mexico and preparing and going through all that pollution in the air, the altitude, that's crazy as well. And for a guy like Mark Hunt who has issues with cardio, he looked really good. So I think one of the things that Mark Hunt and his camp are going to take away from this fight is, on 3 weeks' notice, he almost beat Verdum. So what could he do if he really had a big training camp going into a fight? And I know that in a lot of interviews that he's had, and the one that he had with Ariel from MMA Fighting, where he spoke about how, back in the day in K1, he used to drink and smoke leading into fights. We don't know how much of a training camp he's really had going into a lot of his fights, even his earlier UFC fights. And if he's motivated to have a big, strong training camp, before his next fight that he has, because he'll be so motivated from seeing what he could do in 3 weeks. I'd be really interested to see that, Mark Hunt. But regardless, he did such an amazing job. I think both guys came away a lot better than before the fight, and I really think even though Mark Hunt was a really popular fighter before this fight, after this fight and everything that he did and everything that he's gone through and the spotlight on his life and everything that he's done, I think he comes out a big star for the UFC. And, I think he still has a lot of great fights left in him. Where a guy like Verdum, who's been overlooked for such a long time, comes off smelling like roses going into this fight with Kane. Who's going to miss that fight now? He looked great. He knocked out Mark Hunt. So I think the UFC won big with that fight.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's something that they can definitely use in highlight reels, and it's just another good way to build Fabrizio Verdum, given that in his fight against Kane, I think a lot of people were writing off Fabrizio Verdum, and I think you can use that in promotion. Obviously, Junior Dos Santos, who's one of the most deadliest strikers in heavyweight, if not the most deadliest strikers, took him 3 rounds to knock out Mark Hunt, and Fabrizio did it in 2.5. So, Fabrizio Verdum, a guy you got to respect a lot, a guy you got to be happy for. He's been doing this for a long time. Made his MMA debut in 2002, so it's taken him 12 years. He's technically not the heavyweight champion, but he's definitely one step closer. So huge respect and big congratulations to Fabrizio Verdum. Guys, I think that's pretty much a wrap for another week for Submission Radio. As always, you can follow us on Twitter at SubmissionAUS. We love to chat to the fans. We love to put up heaps of funny stuff, so definitely check that out. If you've enjoyed the show, by all means, subscribe. We'll be back next week. We've got a lot of good guests planned. Dennis, any final messages to the fans?
Yeah, just a couple. Number one, what about that translator at UFC 180? It seems like her and Joe Rogan went through a relationship from the beginning to the end, where at the start she was trying to get her head into the area where she needed to hear the questions and get near the mic, and near the end Joe Rogan had the arm around her and they had a very nicely, tightly run little unit there. So congratulations on the two for, making that relationship work near the end of the event. And number two, we have a going away party coming out with Kid Dale this week. It's going to be up on the channel. Look out on Twitter and Facebook. We're going to put it up. We basically have a farewell party for Kit as he goes to America and leaves us Australians behind, but that's fine because he'll be coming back telling us more stories about his American adventures and really having a go, at his jiu-jitsu career by training with some of the elite guys overseas. So congratulations to Kit on the move, and you guys need to check out this party that we have for him.
And of course, don't forget, guys, Technique of the Week every single damn Wednesday. We got more techniques coming this Wednesday and every Wednesday, so don't forget to subscribe for that. And obviously we'll be back next week for another episode of Submission Radio. Like we said before, big guests coming. I'm really excited. We'll see you guys next week.